Victoria Harrison slapped Sarah across the face so hard her head snapped sideways. "You worthless little tramp! You think you can hide from me? You think you can take my grandchildren and disappear?" Sarah tasted blood. Her hand flew to her cheek, feeling the heat already rising where Victoria's palm had connected. Behind her, Emma screamed. Jake launched himself at his grandmother's fist, swinging wildly until Victoria's driver caught him and held him back. 24 hours, Victoria hissed, her face inches from Sarah's. 24 hours ago, I gave you a chance to walk away with some dignity. Instead, you ran like a thief in the night, to a house that doesn't belong to you, looking for things that were never meant for your eyes. She grabbed Sarah's chin, forcing eye contact. "I've destroyed better women than you, Sarah, and I enjoyed every moment." Emma's voice cut through the violence, small and shattered. Mom, are we homeless now? If this story moves you, please subscribe to my channel and follow Sarah's journey to the very end. Comment below with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. 72 hours earlier, Sarah Mitchell stood in the kitchen of the house she'd shared with David for 11 years, watching her mother-in-law systematically destroy her life. Victoria Harrison moved through the space like a general conquering enemy territory. She opened cabinets and examined contents with theatrical disdain. She picked up family photographs and set them face down on counters. She touched Sarah's possessions as if they were contaminated. "You know what David told me the week before he died?" Victoria didn't look at Sarah as she spoke. "He told me he'd made a terrible mistake, that marrying you was the worst decision of his life." Sarah's hands curled into fists at her sides. "That's a lie." "Is it?" Victoria finally turned. Her perfectly made-up face arranged in an expression of false sympathy. "David was miserable, Sarah, working 3 jobs to support your lifestyle, watching his children grow up in a house that embarrassed him, knowing his mother had been right about you all along. David loved me. David settled for you. There's a difference." Victoria pulled an envelope from her designer handbag. "These are foreclosure papers. The bank is taking this house in 72 hours. David took out a second mortgage 18 months ago. He also maxed out 4 credit cards I didn't know existed. And he had a gambling problem that cost this family over $300,000. Sarah felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. "You're lying. David didn't gamble. He didn't tell you." Victoria's smile was razor sharp. "Interesting, isn't it, how little you actually knew your own husband?" The papers landed on the counter between them. Sarah stared at them without touching them as if they might burn her skin. "I didn't know about any of this." "Of course you didn't. David protected you from the consequences of his choices. But David is dead, and now those consequences belong to you." Sarah's hand moved unconsciously to her pregnant belly. 7 months. The baby would come in 8 weeks, maybe less, if the stress triggered early labor. And now she was learning that everything she'd believed about her life was built on lies. "What do you want, Victoria? I want what's best for my grandchildren." Victoria moved closer, her expensive perfume overwhelming in the small kitchen. "Emma and Jacob deserve stability. They deserve the best schools, the best opportunities, the best future. They deserve to be raised as Harrisons. They're my children. They're David's children, and David would want them with family who can actually provide for them." Victoria produced a second document from her bag. "Full custody transfer. You sign this, and I make David's debts disappear. You can visit on holidays. Supervised, of course." Sarah looked at the document, legal language she didn't fully understand. Her children's names printed in cold black type, a signature line at the bottom waiting to erase her from their lives. "And if I don't sign, then I bury you in litigation until you're so broke you can't afford a lawyer. I call Child Protective Services about the gambling addict father and the unemployed mother who can't provide stable housing. I make sure every judge in this state knows exactly what kind of environment those children have been living in." Victoria leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "And then I take them anyway. But instead of holidays, you get nothing. Not a birthday card, not a phone call, not a photograph. You become a ghost to your own children, and eventually they forget you ever existed." Sarah's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. She thought about her bank account. $47.32. She thought about her job at the diner. $11 an hour, plus tips that barely covered gas money. She thought about the baby growing inside her, innocent and unaware that its world was falling apart before it even arrived. "I need time to think." "You have until tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. After that, my lawyers file the custody petition, and we do this the hard way." Victoria straightened, adjusting her coat. "Sleep well, Sarah, if you can." She walked out without looking back. Sarah stood frozen in her kitchen for what felt like hours. The foreclosure papers sat on the counter like a bomb waiting to explode. The custody document lay beside them, a death warrant for her family. Emma appeared in the doorway. 11 years old, her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes, too young to understand legal documents but old enough to recognize devastation on her mother's face. "Mom, what did Grandma want?" Sarah wiped her eyes quickly. "Nothing, baby, just some paperwork about your dad's estate." She looked really mad. Grandma's always a little intense. Jake pushed past his sister, 9 years old, and already wearing the expression of someone who'd learned that adults couldn't be trusted to protect him. He went straight to the counter and picked up the foreclosure notice. "What's foreclosure mean?" Sarah's heart cracked. "Jake, don't worry about that. It says the bank is taking our house." His voice was flat, analytical, the way he processed information he couldn't emotionally handle. "In 72 hours, that's 3 days. I'm going to figure this out." "How?" Jake looked at her with eyes that demanded honesty. "Dad's dead. We don't have any money. Grandma hates you. How are you going to figure this out?" Sarah had no answer. That night, after the children were asleep, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with her laptop trying to understand the magnitude of her situation. David's credit cards showed charges she'd never seen. Hotels in cities he'd told her were business trips. Cash advances totaling over $50,000. Purchases at stores she didn't recognize in amounts that made her physically sick. The second mortgage documents confirmed Victoria's claims. David had borrowed $180,000 against their home 18 months ago. The monthly payments had been coming from an account Sarah didn't know existed, funded by sources she couldn't trace. When David died, the payments stopped. The bank sent notices to an email address she'd never seen. Sarah calculated and recalculated. Even if she sold everything they owned, she couldn't cover a fraction of the debt. Even if she worked double shifts for the next 5 years, she couldn't dig out of this hole. David had destroyed them. Her loving husband, her partner, the father of her children had systematically dismantled their financial future and left her to face the wreckage alone. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, Charlotte area code. She almost didn't answer. Bill collectors had been calling for weeks demanding payment for debts she hadn't known existed. But something made her pick up. "Is this Sarah Mitchell? Sarah Catherine Mitchell?" The voice was elderly female and unexpectedly warm. "Who is this? My name is Helen Crawford. I've been trying to reach you for 3 months. Your phone number kept changing and the letters I sent were returned, unopened." Sarah's exhaustion made her sharp. "If you're selling something, I'm not interested." "I'm not selling anything, dear. I'm trying to give you something. Something your grandmother left for you." Sarah's breath caught.
"What do you want?"
"My grandmother writ Rose Chen. She was my closest friend for 40 years. She died when you were 19, but she left instructions. Very specific instructions about what to do when this moment came." "What moment?" "The moment Victoria Harrison tried to take everything from you." Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. "How do you know about Victoria?" "Because Rose predicted it. 25 years ago, she told me exactly what would happen. She said the Harrisons would put someone in your life. Someone who would get close to you, marry you, give you children. And then when the time was right, they would take everything." The kitchen seemed to spin around Sarah. "What are you talking about?" "Your husband, David. Rose knew about him before you ever met him. She tried to warn your mother, but Catherine wouldn't listen. She was in love just like you were." "You're not making any sense." "I know, dear, I know it sounds crazy, but there's a house in Asheville. Your grandmother's house. She left it for you in a trust that activated 3 months ago when David died. Everything you need to understand is there." Sarah pressed her palm against the table, steadying herself. "Why would my grandmother leave me a house? I barely knew her. My mother kept us apart." "Your mother was trying to protect you. She found out what Rose had been hiding. She was building a case against the Harrisons, and then she died in a car accident." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her mother, Catherine, had died when Sarah was 19. A rainy highway. A truck that crossed the center line. Everyone said it was tragic. Random. The kind of thing that happens and can't be explained. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your mother's accident wasn't an accident, just like David's accident wasn't an accident." Sarah felt bile rise in her throat. She barely made it to the sink before she vomited her pregnant body, rejecting the horror of what she was hearing. "They killed David." Her voice came out as a croak. "Come to Asheville, Sarah. Come to Rose's house. The truth is waiting for you, but come quickly. Victoria has been searching for what Rose left behind for 25 years. If she finds out you're getting close to it, she'll kill me too." Helen's silence was confirmation enough. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She packed while her children dreamed, and moving through the house like a ghost, selecting what mattered most and leaving behind what she couldn't carry. Photographs, important documents, the kids' favorite possessions, everything crammed into 17 boxes that barely fit in the aging minivan David had always promised to replace. At 4 a.m., she woke Emma and Jake. "We're going on a trip." Jake was instantly alert. "Where?" "Asheville, a house that belonged to your great-great-grandmother." "Why are we leaving in the dark?" Sarah hesitated. Her children deserved honesty, but they were also still children, and some truths were too heavy for young shoulders. "Because Grandma Victoria wants to take you away from me, and I'm not going to let that happen." Emma started crying. Jake's face went blank, that terrible shutdown he'd learned in the months since his father's death. "We're running away," Emma whispered. "We're going somewhere safe." Sarah knelt, pulling both children into her arms as best she could with her pregnant belly between them. "I know things are scary right now. I know you don't understand everything that's happening, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Jake spoke first. "Dad used to say trust is earned." The words cut deep. David, the man who had apparently lied about everything, whose trust had been a manipulation from the start. "Your dad was right," Sarah said carefully, "so let me earn your trust. Let me show you that I will never ever let anyone take you from me." Emma wiped her nose on her sleeve. "Promise." "I promise." They left Charlotte at 4:47 a.m., the sky still dark, the streets empty. Sarah watched her rearview mirror compulsively for the first hour, terrified she'd see Victoria's black SUV following them, but the highway stayed clear. At 7 a.m., her phone rang. Victoria's name on the screen. Sarah let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, a text, "Where are you?" Then another, "You can't run from me." Then another, "I'll find you. I always find what belongs to me." Sarah turned off her phone and kept driving. The house on Magnolia Street was worse than Sarah had imagined. Victorian architecture buried beneath decades of neglect. Paint peeling in sheets to reveal rotted wood underneath. Windows covered with plywood. A porch that sagged so badly the front steps had pulled away from the frame. Jake's voice was flat. "This is the safe place." "It needs some work." "It needs a bulldozer." Emma pressed her face against the car window. "Is it haunted?" Sarah wanted to say no, but looking at the house, she honestly wasn't sure. Helen Crawford was waiting for them. She was smaller than Sarah had expected, barely 5 feet tall, with steel gray hair and eyes that seemed to see straight through to Sarah's soul. In her weathered hands, she held a brass key. "You came." Helen's voice cracked with emotion. "I wasn't sure you would." Sarah helped her children out of the car, keeping them close. "I didn't have anywhere else to go." "Sometimes that's how we find where we're supposed to be." Helen held out the key. This was Rose's, and before her it belonged to her mother. Chen women have been fighting for justice in this country for 4 generations. Now it's your turn. Sarah took the key. Cold brass. Heavier than she expected. A small rose engraved into the head. "I don't understand any of this," she admitted. "My mother never told me anything about Rose, about this house, about whatever secrets everyone keeps talking about. Your mother was trying to protect you. She found what Rose had hidden. She was building a case, preparing to expose everything." Helen's voice dropped. "And then she died." "In a car accident." "That's what everyone called it." Helen's eyes went hard. "Just like your husband's death. Just like anything bad that happens to anyone who gets too close to Harrison family secrets." Sarah felt the baby kick against her ribs, a reminder that it wasn't just her life at stake. "Can you prove any of this, that the Harrisons killed my mother, killed David?" Helen gestured toward the ruined house. "The proof is in there. Everything Rose spent 60 years collecting. Everything your mother was using to build her case. Documents, photographs, financial records. $27 million worth of theft, Sarah. And evidence of how the Harrisons have silenced anyone who threatened to expose them." $27 million. Sarah's knees went weak. She grabbed the porch railing, feeling rotted wood creak beneath her weight. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would they do this? Because they built their empire on stolen property. Chinese families, black families, working-class people who had no power to fight back. The Harrisons took their land, their businesses, their futures. And they've spent decades making sure no one lives long enough to prove it." Sarah looked at her children, Emma clutching her worn stuffed rabbit. Jake standing rigid, his young face set in an expression of fury she'd never seen before. They were all in danger now, Whatever Rose had hidden in this house, whatever truths were waiting to be uncovered, the Harrisons would do anything to keep them buried, including killing a pregnant woman and 2 children. "Show me," Sarah said. "Show me everything." The inside of the house was a time capsule of dust and decay, furniture shrouded in white sheets, cobwebs spanning corners like architectural details, the smell of old paper and stale air, and something else, something that felt like waiting. Helen led them through rooms that echoed with emptiness. Living room, dining room, kitchen with appliances from the 1970s and linoleum curling at the edges. Rose spent her final years in the study upstairs, Helen explained. After Catherine died, she knew time was running out. She wrote letters, organized documents, made sure everything was in place for when you would eventually come. How did she know I would come? She didn't. She hoped. She planned for every possibility. Helen stopped at the foot of the stairs. If you came, the evidence would be waiting. If you didn't, she had copies hidden in safe deposit boxes across 3 states. Sarah started up the stairs, one hand on her belly, one on the railing. The wood groaned beneath her weight, but held. The study door was locked, heavy oak painted over multiple times. Sarah tried the brass key Helen had given her, but it wouldn't turn. The mechanism was rusted or blocked or deliberately jammed. "Rose hid the real key," Helen said. "She told me only the right person would find it when they needed it." Sarah pressed her palm against the door, feeling the solid wood beneath her fingers. Somewhere behind this barrier were answers. Proof. Justice. And she couldn't reach any of it. Emma tugged on her sleeve. "Mom, look at this." Sarah turned. Her daughter was pointing at the baseboard near the hallway window. Tiny letters carved into the wood barely visible in the shadow. Sarah knelt her pregnant belly, making the position awkward. The letters swam into focus. "Begin where light meets shadow." Her breath stopped. She knew that handwriting. She'd grown up seeing it on birthday cards and permission slips and notes left on the refrigerator. Her mother's handwriting. "Mom?" Jake's voice was sharp with concern. "What's wrong?" "It's from your grandmother, Catherine." Sarah traced the carved letters with trembling fingers. "She was here. She left this for me." Helen made a sound that might have been a sob. "Catherine spent the last year of her life here. She was organizing Rose's evidence, building the legal case. She told me she was leaving clues for you just in case something happened to her. Just in case someone killed her." "Yes." Sarah stood slowly, her mind racing. "Begin where light meets shadow." It wasn't just a message. It was the first step in a treasure hunt designed by her dead mother. A map to whatever Rose had hidden. Light meets shadow in the kitchen. Jake had already figured it out. Every morning the sun comes through the east window and makes a line on the floor. They rushed downstairs. The kitchen faced east. Even in the mid-morning light, Sarah could see what Jake meant. Dust on the floor showed where sunlight created a sharp division each morning. A line where light met shadow. Jake was already kneeling, examining the floorboards. "This one's different. It's been pried up before." Sarah grabbed the edge and pulled. The board came up easily, revealing a hollow space beneath. Inside was a tin box. Her hands shook as she lifted it out. Old, rusted at the edges, but sealed tight. She pried open the lid. A single folded paper. Her mother's handwriting. Dated February 3rd, 2009, 2 weeks before Catherine's fatal car accident. "My darling Sarah, if you're reading this, you found your way home. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth while I was alive. I was trying to protect you. But protection without knowledge is just another kind of prison. This house holds secrets that powerful people have killed to keep buried. The answers you seek are in Rose's study, but you must earn your way there. Follow the clues I've left. Each one will teach you something important. Your grandmother spent 60 years fighting for justice. I spent 10 years building a case against the people who destroyed our families. We both ran out of time. Now it's your turn. Trust the process. Trust yourself. And know that I have always, always loved you." Mom, Sarah read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Her mother's voice reached across 16 years of death, guiding her, loving her, preparing her for a battle she hadn't known she was fighting. Jake's voice cut through her grief. "What does it say about secrets?" Sarah wiped her eyes. "It says the answers are in the study. We need to find the key." Emma pointed at the letter. "She said follow the clues. There must be more." They spent the next 2 days tearing the house apart. Sarah worked despite her exhaustion, despite the swelling in her feet, despite the baby pressing on her bladder every hour. She searched drawers and cabinets and closets, looking for her mother's handwriting, looking for the next step in the treasure hunt. Helen brought food and worry in equal measure. You need to rest. The baby needs you healthy. The baby needs me alive. Sarah was pulling books from shelves in the living room, checking each one for hidden notes. If Victoria finds us before I find what Rose left, none of us will be safe. On the morning of the second day, her phone rang. She turned it back on to check for emergency messages from the children's school. Now she wished she hadn't. Victoria Harrison's name on the screen. Sarah answered. Did you think I wouldn't find you? Victoria's voice was silk over steel. Did you think you could run to some rotting house in Asheville and I wouldn't know within hours? Sarah's blood went cold. How did you? I have friends everywhere, Sarah. Police, lawyers, judges, private investigators who specialize in finding people who don't want to be found. Victoria laughed softly. I know you're at Rose Chen's house. I know you're looking for whatever that paranoid old woman hid, and I know you haven't found it yet. What do you want? I want what I've always wanted. My grandchildren, Rose's documents, and you out of my life permanently. Sarah's hand moved to her belly. And if I give you what you want, then you get to live. Maybe. If you behave. Victoria's voice hardened. But if you keep digging, if you find what Rose hid, if you try to use it against my family, I'll do to you what I did to your mother. What I did to David. The words hit Sarah like bullets. You killed them. You actually killed them. I protected my family, just like I'll protect it now. The line went dead. Sarah stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. Her mother, her husband, murdered by the woman who was now hunting her. Jake appeared in the doorway. Mom, you look like you're going to pass out. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're shaking. Sarah looked at her son, 9 years old. Too young for this. Too young for all of it. But she couldn't protect him by lying. Not anymore. That was Grandma Victoria. She knows we're here. She knows what we're looking for. Jake's face went pale, then hard. She's coming for us. Yes. Then we need to find it first. He disappeared back into the house, his small body rigid with determination. A moment later, Sarah heard him in the bathroom, opening cabinets, searching. She forced herself to move, forced herself to think. Victoria knew they were here. Victoria was coming. They had hours, maybe less. They found the second clue 30 minutes later. Jake had been measuring the bathroom floor when he noticed the bathtub's platform was uneven. He'd crawled underneath and found words carved into the wood. Where water once flowed, knowledge waits. Sarah felt along the platform's edges until she found the panel. Behind it, another envelope wrapped in plastic. My darling family, you're doing so well. I'm proud of how hard you're working. The house is teaching you what Grandma Rose tried to teach me, that value comes from effort, not inheritance. That truth is worth more than comfort. That family means fighting for each other no matter the cost. One more step. The key is hidden where opposites meet. Trust your creativity, Emma. Trust your logic, Jake. Trust yourself, Sarah. Mom, where opposites meet. Jake was already working the problem. North and south, hot and cold, light and dark. Emma had been quiet, sketching in her notebook, despite the chaos. Now she looked up. Magnetic poles, north and south on a compass. They're opposites. Helen's voice came from the doorway. Rose collected antique compasses. She kept them in the study. Which we can't access, Sarah said. Not the main collection, but she had one special compass, her father's. She kept it somewhere else. They found it in the basement, buried in a trunk of Rose's father's possessions. An antique brass compass still perfectly balanced. On its base, N and S marked on opposite sides. Jake turned it over in his hands. The brass key Helen gave us is non-magnetic. Compass housings are usually brass because brass doesn't affect magnetic readings. We need a magnetic key, Emma said. Something iron. They searched the basement with renewed desperation. Victoria was coming. Every minute brought her closer. Emma found it in the same trunk. A long iron spike rusted but intact. Engraved on its head, Chen family. They gathered in front of the study door. Sarah held the brass key. Jake held the iron spike. Behind them, Emma held her sketchbook like a shield. There has to be a second keyhole, Sarah said. Jake ran his fingers around the decorative plate covering the lock. Here, behind the cover, there's another mechanism. Sarah pried off the plate with a kitchen knife. A second smaller keyhole. Both at the same time, she said. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Both keys turned. The mechanism clicked. The door swung open. Rose's study was exactly as Helen had described, untouched for decades. Bookshelves lining 3 walls, a massive desk facing the window, filing cabinets in the corner, a safe against the far wall. But Sarah barely saw any of it, because on the desk was a letter, addressed in Rose's handwriting. To Sarah Catherine Mitchell when she is ready. My great-granddaughter, if you're reading this, Catherine is gone and you've proven yourself worthy. I spent 60 years collecting this evidence and now it's yours. The filing cabinets hold documentation of Harrison family crimes. Properties stolen through fraud during the Depression. Families destroyed. Through predatory lending, bribes to judges and police and city officials. $27 million in theft. Sarah, $27 million built on the suffering of people who couldn't fight back. The safe contains bonds and stocks I purchased in your name. Your true inheritance. Separate from anything the Harrisons can touch. But there's more. More than money. More than property. Your husband David was not what he seemed. The Harrisons placed him in your path deliberately. They chose him, groomed him, sent him to meet you at that diner where you worked. His job was to marry you, have children with you, and eventually gain access to this house and everything in it. His gambling debts were manufactured, a cover story for money he was funneling to Harrison accounts. His death was not an accident. When David failed to find my evidence, he became expendable, just like your mother before him. I'm sorry to tell you this way. I'm sorry I couldn't protect them, couldn't protect you, but you need to know the truth about who you're fighting. They've killed before. They'll kill again. Be careful, be brave, and be better than they are. Use this evidence to destroy them, not for revenge, for justice. All my love across the years. Your grandmother Rose, the letter fell from Sarah's hand. David, her David, the man she'd loved, the man she'd married, the man she'd mourned, a lie. All of it. From the moment he'd smiled at her across the diner counter, he'd been playing a role. Every kiss, every whispered I love you, every moment of their 11 years together. A performance designed to destroy her. Sarah felt something tear loose inside her chest. She stumbled backward, hitting the bookshelf, sliding down to the dusty floor as her legs gave out beneath her. She couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. The baby was kicking frantically, responding to stress hormones flooding her system. Mom! Emma's voice came from far away. Mom, what's wrong? Sarah opened her mouth, but only a sob came out. Then another. Then she was crying so hard she couldn't see, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but drown in the tidal wave of betrayal crashing over her. Jake's voice sharp and scared. Helen? Something's wrong with Mom. Hands on her shoulders, Helen's face swimming into view. Breathe, Sarah. You have to breathe. For the baby, breathe. But Sarah couldn't breathe. She could only cry. For David, who had never loved her. For her mother, who had died trying to protect her. For Rose, who had spent 60 years fighting a battle Sarah hadn't even known existed. For herself. The fool who had believed every lie. Who had built her life on a foundation of deception. Who had given everything to a man whose job was to take everything from her. I want to stop. The words came out broken, barely audible. I can't do this. They've already won. They killed everyone who tried to fight them. They'll kill me too. Emma knelt beside her mother, 11 years old, tears streaming down her face, but her voice was steady. Mom, look at me. Sarah forced her eyes to focus on her daughter. Dad lied to us, I know. It hurts so much I can barely breathe. Emma's small hand found Sarah's. But Grandma Rose didn't lie. Great-grandmother Catherine didn't lie. They spent their whole lives trying to help us. They believed we were strong enough to finish what they started. Jake appeared on Sarah's other side. We can't let them down. We can't let the Harrisons win. They've already won. Sarah's voice was hollow. They killed everyone. They didn't kill us. Jake's jaw was set. And they're not going to, because we're going to fight back. Sarah looked at her children, at the determination in their young faces, at the inheritance they'd received from generations of Chen women. Not money, not property, courage. She thought about her grandmother Rose documenting crimes for 60 years, never giving up. She thought about her mother Catherine building a legal case even though she knew it might cost her life. She thought about herself running from Victoria with $47 in her pocket and 2 children in the back seat. Chen women didn't quit. Chen women fought. Sarah wiped her eyes. Her hands were still shaking. Her heart was still broken. But something else was rising through the devastation. Rage. Pure, clean, righteous rage. Victoria Harrison had taken everything from her: her mother, her husband, her financial security, her sense of self. But Victoria hadn't taken her children, hadn't taken this house, hadn't taken the evidence that could bring the entire Harrison empire crashing down. Not yet. "Help me up," Sarah said. Her children pulled her to her feet. She stood unsteadily, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the bookshelf for support. Helen was watching her with something like hope in her old eyes. "What are you going to do?" Sarah looked at the filing cabinets full of evidence, at the safe containing her true inheritance, at the letter from her grandmother still lying on the dusty floor. "Victoria's coming," she said. "She told me herself. She knows we're here and she's coming to finish what she started." "Then we should run," Helen said. "Take the most important documents and disappear." "No." Sarah's voice was steady now, certain. "Running is what they expect. Running is what keeps them in power. Rose didn't run. My mother didn't run. I'm not running either." "Then what?" Sarah moved to the filing cabinets, pulled open the first drawer, stared at row after row of documentation, property records, financial statements, photographs, testimony from families destroyed by Harrison greed, 60 years of evidence, $27 million of theft, and crimes that went far beyond money. Murder, her mother, her husband, how many others? "We're going to war," Sarah said. "We're going to take everything the Harrisons stole and give it back to the families they destroyed. We're going to expose every crime, every bribe, every murder." She turned to face her children. Emma with her artist soul and fierce heart. Jake with his analytical mind and protective instincts. "And we're going to win. Not because we're stronger than them, not because we have more money or more power, but because we have truth. And truth in the end is the only weapon that matters." Jake's voice was quiet but certain. "How do we start?" Sarah picked up Rose's letter. Read it one more time, then folded it carefully and placed it over her heart. "We start by surviving the next 24 hours. Victoria's coming. When she gets here, she's going to try to destroy this evidence and anyone who's seen it." "So we hide it," Emma said. "No, we copy it. Every document, every photograph, every piece of testimony." Sarah looked at Helen. "You said Rose had safe deposit boxes in 3 states. Do you know where they are?" "I know where 2 of them are. The third Rose never told me. This on the 2 is enough to start. We make copies tonight. Tomorrow you take them somewhere safe while we deal with Victoria." "Deal with her how?" Helen's voice was worried. "She'll have lawyers, maybe police, maybe worse." Sarah thought about the woman who had slapped her across the face, who had threatened her children, who had murdered the people Sarah loved most. "Let her come," Sarah said. "Let her bring everyone she has, because when she walks through that door, she's going to find out that Chen women don't break." She looked at Emma and Chan and Jake, at the legacy they carried in their blood. "We fight back." The night that followed was chaos and purpose. They worked by flashlight, afraid to draw attention with too many lights. Sarah photographed documents while Helen organized them by date and type. Jake created a filing system on his tablet categorizing evidence. Emma stood watch at the windows, alert for any sign of approaching vehicles. At midnight, they found the safe combination. It was hidden in Rose's journal, disguised as a poem. Numbers embedded in the first letter of each line, requiring the reader to know Rose's favorite Robert Frost poem to recognize the pattern. "The Road Not Taken," published in 1916. 1916. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside were stock certificates. IBM, Ford, General Electric, purchased decades ago, now worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. All in Sarah's name. Beneath them, municipal bonds. Treasury notes. Documentation of investments Rose had made quietly, secretly building a war chest for a battle she knew would come. At the bottom of the safe, a leather journal. Rose's handwriting on every page. Names of Harrison victims, property addresses, dates and amounts of fraudulent transactions. And something else. 3 death certificates. Rose's son killed in 1968 during what was ruled a construction accident. Catherine Mitchell killed in 2009 in a car accident. David Mitchell killed 7 months ago in a car accident. Next to each certificate in Rose's careful handwriting, murdered. Sarah stared at the word until it burned into her brain. 3 generations of her family. Murdered by the same people. For the same reason. Because they got too close to the truth. She was the 4th generation now, and Victoria was coming for her. Dawn broke gray and cold. Sarah had been awake for over 30 hours. Her body screamed for rest. The baby kicked constantly, distressed by its mother's exhaustion, but there was no time for rest. Helen left at 7 a.m., her car loaded with copies of the most crucial documents. She would drive to Atlanta first, then Memphis. The safe deposit boxes would hold Rose's evidence until Sarah was ready to use it, or until Sarah was dead and someone else would have to continue the fight. "Be careful," Sarah said, hugging the old woman at the door. "Victoria has people everywhere. Victoria doesn't know I exist. Rose made sure of that." Helen pressed something into Sarah's palm, a small brass pin shaped like a rose. "This belonged to your grandmother. She wore it every day, for luck." Sarah pinned it to her shirt, feeling the slight weight against her chest. "I'll be back in 3 days," Helen said. "Try to stay alive until then." She drove away without looking back. Sarah turned to face her children. "What now?" Jake asked. "Now we wait. For Grandma Victoria. For whatever comes next." They didn't have to wait long. The black SUV appeared at 2 p.m., pulling into the driveway with the arrogance of people who believed they owned the world. Victoria Harrison stepped out first. Behind her, 2 men in dark suits. Not lawyers. Something else. Sarah met them on the porch. "You have something that belongs to me," Victoria said without preamble. "Rose's evidence. It belongs to me now. Legally. The house, the contents, everything." Victoria's smile was cold. "Legal is such a flexible concept when you have enough money. I could have this property seized by tonight. Environmental violations, code enforcement, eminent domain. There are 100 ways to take what I want." "Then why are you here? Why not just send your lawyers?" Victoria stepped closer. Close enough for Sarah to see the lines around her eyes, the tension in her jaw. "Because I want you to understand something. This isn't about money. It's not even about protecting my family's reputation." She lowered her voice. "It's about power. The kind of power that lets me do whatever I want to, whoever I want. Your grandmother tried to take that from me. Your mother tried. Your husband failed at his one job of preventing this moment." Sarah felt her fists clench. "David was your employee. David was an investment. We paid for his education, got him a job at the right company, made sure he was in the right place when you started working at that diner." Victoria's smile widened. "He was supposed to charm. You allowed to marry you and find Rose's evidence before anyone else could. Instead, he fell in love with you. Genuinely fell in love. Can you imagine?" Sarah said nothing. "That's when he became a liability. A man in love might develop inconvenient loyalties, might start questioning his employers, might even warn his wife about what was coming. So you killed him." "I protected my family, just like I'm protecting them now." Victoria turned to the men behind her. "Search the house. Every room, every drawer, every floorboard. Find Rose's documents." "They're not here." Sarah's voice was steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "What? The documents you're looking for. They were here. I found them. I read them. And then I sent them somewhere you'll never find them." Victoria's composure cracked. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Sarah stepped forward, using her pregnant belly like a shield. "Your grandfather stole 17 properties from families who couldn't fight back. Chinese immigrants. Black families. Working-class people who trusted the system to protect them. $27 million in current value, all built on fraud and bribery and murder." Victoria's face went pale. "I have documentation of every transaction, bank records, bribe payments to Judge Morrison in 1952, death threats sent to the Chen family in 1960, and medical examiner reports that were falsified to cover up 3 murders." Sarah was guessing about some of the details, but Victoria's expression confirmed she was guessing right. "You have nothing." Victoria's voice was thin. "Allegations without proof." "I have Rose Chen's 60 years of proof, filed in safe deposit boxes in 3 states, ready to be delivered to the FBI, the IRS, and every news organization in North Carolina if anything happens to me or my children." Silence stretched between them. The men in suits looked at Victoria, waiting for orders. Victoria looked at Sarah, seeing her clearly for the first time. Not the weak little waitress she'd dismissed for 12 years. Not the easy target she'd expected to crush without effort. Something else, something dangerous. "What do you want?" Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. "Justice? For every family your grandfather destroyed. For my grandmother. For my mother. For David, who might have been your employee, but who was also the father of my children. You want money. I want restoration. Every property returned to its rightful heirs. Every family compensated for generations of loss. Public acknowledgement of what the Harrisons did and how they profited from it." Victoria laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "You're insane. That would destroy us." "Yes, it would." "I'll fight you. Every court, every jurisdiction. I'll bury you in litigation until your grandchildren are collecting Social Security." Sarah nodded. "I know. I'm counting on it." "What does that mean?" "It means the longer you fight, the more attention this case gets. The more reporters dig into Harrison history. The more descendants of your victims learn they're owed something." Sarah smiled, and it felt like armor. "It means that even if you win in court, you lose everywhere else. Your reputation, your social standing, your business partnerships, all of it gone, because everyone will know what the Harrison fortune was built on." Victoria stared at her for a long moment. Then she turned to her men. "We're leaving." "Mrs. Harrison." "I said we're leaving." Victoria walked to her SUV, then stopped, turned back. Her face was a mask of controlled fury. "This isn't over. You've started something you can't finish. And when it all falls apart, when you realize you've destroyed your children's future for the sake of dead people who don't matter anymore, remember this moment. Remember that I gave you a chance to walk away." Sarah watched the SUV disappear down the street. Then her knees buckled. Jake caught her before she hit the ground. "Mom, I'm okay." She wasn't okay. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "I just need a minute." "You were amazing." Emma's voice was awed. "You made her scared? I could see it." Sarah laughed, and it came out half-sob. "I was terrified." "But you didn't show it." "That's the secret." Sarah let her children help her to a chair on the porch. "Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway." She looked at the street where Victoria's SUV had vanished. The war wasn't over. It was barely beginning. There would be lawyers and courtrooms and media attention. There would be threats and intimidation and probably attempts on her life. But she wasn't alone anymore. She had Rose's evidence. She had Helen's support. She had the names of 17 families who deserved to know the truth about what had been done to them. And she had her children. The 4th generation of Chen women. The continuation of a legacy that stretched back 100 years. Sarah pressed her hand against her pregnant belly, feeling her unborn daughter kick. The 5th generation. "What happens now?" Jake asked. Sarah thought about everything waiting for them. The legal battles, the family restoration, the justice Rose had dreamed of for 60 years. "Now we fight," she said. "Together." The house on Magnolia Street stood behind them, no longer abandoned, no longer empty, filled now with purpose and determination and the unshakable knowledge that some battles were worth fighting no matter how long they took. Chen women didn't quit. Chen women didn't break. Chen women won. 3 days passed like a held breath. Sarah barely slept. Every sound outside the house sent her heart racing. Every car that drove past made her check the windows. Victoria's promise echoed in her mind like a curse. This isn't over. On the morning of the 4th day, Helen returned. She walked through the front door carrying a cardboard box and wearing an expression Sarah couldn't read. Triumph, fear, something in between. "The documents are secure," Helen said. "Atlanta and Memphis, 2 separate banks, 2 separate safe deposit boxes. Nobody followed me." Sarah felt some of the tension drain from her shoulders. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Helen set the box on the kitchen table. "I found something in Memphis. Something Rose never told me about." She opened the box. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Black and white images from the 1950s and 1960s. Families standing in front of businesses. Children playing on sidewalks. Communities that looked vibrant and alive. "These are the families," Helen said quietly. "The 17 families the Harrisons destroyed. Rose photographed them before everything was taken." Sarah picked up the first photograph. A Chinese family outside a grocery store, the sign reading Chen's Market in both English and Chinese characters. "That's your great-great-grandfather's store," Helen said. "Rose's father. The Harrisons took it in 1952. Jake appeared at Sarah's elbow. "The Harrisons stole from our family, too. They stole from everyone." Helen spread more photographs across the table. The Williams family shoe repair shop, the Jefferson family boarding house, the Martinez grocery store. 17 families, 17 businesses, all taken through fraud and threats and corruption. Emma had been sketching in the corner, but now she moved closer. What happened to them? The families. Some moved away, some died in poverty, some are still here, still struggling. Helen's voice hardened. The descendants of these families live in Charlotte right now. They have no idea their grandparents were robbed, no idea they're owed anything. Sarah stared at the photographs. Real faces, real families, real lives destroyed so the Harrisons could build their empire. We need to find them, she said, every descendant of every family. That's what I thought you'd say. Helen pulled a folder from beneath the photographs. I started making a list, names and addresses for 11 of the 17 families. The others will take more research. Sarah took the folder. 11 families, 11 chances to right a generational wrong. How do we contact them? What do we even say? Calm. The truth. Jake's voice was firm. We tell them the truth. The first family they contacted was the Williams family. Marcus Williams answered his door on a Tuesday evening, suspicion written across his weathered face. He was 63 years old, a retired factory worker with bad knees and a worse pension. Whatever you're selling, I don't want it. I'm not selling anything, Mr. Williams. Sarah held up the photograph of his grandfather's shoe repair shop. I'm here to tell you about something that was stolen from your family 70 years ago. Marcus stared at the photograph. His expression shifted from suspicion to confusion to something that looked like pain. That's my grandfather's shop. How do you have this picture? Can we come inside? It's a long story. 2 hours later, Marcus Williams was crying. Sarah had shown him everything. The property records, the fraudulent tax assessments, the forged signatures, the documentation proving his grandfather had been robbed of a business worth nothing in 1954 but worth over $2 million today. My grandfather died broke, Marcus said, his voice breaking. He drank himself to death because he thought he'd failed us. My father grew up in poverty. I grew up in poverty. My children grew up in poverty. And the whole time, someone else was getting rich off what was stolen from us. Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. I know it doesn't undo what happened. Nothing can undo 70 years of suffering, but there might be a way to get some of it back. Marcus looked up, eyes red but focused. How? We're building a legal case against the Harrison family, all 17 families together. If we win, you could receive compensation for what was taken. And if we lose, then at least the world knows the truth about how the Harrison fortune was built. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to a cabinet in his living room, and pulled out a shoebox. My grandfather kept journals, he said, wrote down everything that happened to him, dates, names, threats he received. I never knew what to do with them. He handed the box to Sarah. Now I do. 1 week later, Sarah had contacted 8 families. Every meeting followed the same pattern: suspicion, confusion, grief, and finally, determination. Every family had pieces of evidence Rose had never seen: journals, letters, photographs, documents hidden in attics and basements for decades, waiting for someone to care enough to look. The case was building itself, but so was the opposition. Robert Anderson arrived on a Thursday morning exactly as Helen had promised. He was younger than Sarah expected, mid-40s, black suit, silver tie, eyes that missed nothing. Mrs. Mitchell, he shook her hand with professional firmness. Helen has told me a great deal about your situation. Then you know what we're up against. I know you're trying to take down one of the most powerful families in North Carolina, with evidence that's 70 years old and witnesses who are mostly dead. He smiled slightly. I've had easier cases. Will you help us? That depends. Robert set his briefcase on the kitchen table. Show me what you have. Sarah spent 3 hours walking him through Rose's documentation, the property records, the financial statements, the evidence of bribery and fraud, the death certificates with Rose's handwritten notes. Robert's expression grew more serious with every page. Your grandmother was thorough, he said finally. More thorough than most professional investigators. This is legitimate evidence of systematic fraud spanning decades. Can we win? In court, possibly. The statute of limitations is a problem, but there are exceptions for fraud. The real challenge is proving current ownership of the properties can be traced directly to the original theft. What about the murders? Robert's face darkened. That's different. The Harrison family has protected itself carefully. No direct evidence links them to your mother's death or your husband's. Just circumstantial connections and your grandmother's suspicions. So they get away with murder. For now. But civil liability is different from criminal. We might not be able to put Victoria Harrison in prison, but we can absolutely destroy her financially and socially. Sarah thought about her mother, about David, about the families who had suffered for generations. It's not enough. It's a start. Robert began organizing the documents into piles. The Magnolia Foundation your mother established has significant resources, enough to fund this litigation for years if necessary, but I need to be honest with you, Mrs. Mitchell. Ms. Mitchell, this will be brutal. The Harrisons will fight with everything they have. They'll attack your credibility, your mental stability, your fitness as a mother. I know. They'll use your pregnancy against you, your financial situation, your husband's supposed gambling problem. I know. And they might try more direct methods. Robert looked at her steadily. The pattern suggests they're willing to kill to protect their secrets. Sarah placed her hand on her belly. The baby was due in 6 weeks. 6 weeks to bring a new life into a war she hadn't chosen but couldn't abandon. Then we'll have to win before they can. The first legal filing landed like a bomb. Robert coordinated with 17 law firms across North Carolina. Each firm represented one family. Each filing was submitted simultaneously at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. The media coverage was instantaneous. Historic lawsuit alleges systematic theft by Harrison Development. 17 families claim property stolen through fraud. Harrison Empire built on Depression-era crimes. Sarah watched the news coverage from Rose's study, surrounded by the evidence that had made it all possible. Emma sat beside her, sketching rapidly. She'd started drawing again after the Williams family meeting. Not dark storms anymore. Now she drew faces. The 17 families. Their children and grandchildren. A visual record of the people they were fighting for. Jake monitored social media on his tablet. Mom, the story's going viral. People are sharing it everywhere. Hashtag Harrison Accountability has been trending for 3 hours. That's good, right? That's really good. Public opinion is on our side. Sarah wished public opinion felt like more protection. Victoria's counterattack came 48 hours later. The custody petition arrived by courier. Thick document. Expensive lawyers. Allegations that read like character assassination. Sarah is mentally unstable. Evidence abandoning her home in Charlotte without notice. Sarah is financially irresponsible. Evidence allowing her husband to accumulate massive debt without awareness. Sarah is endangering her children. Evidence exposing them to dangerous situation including home invasion and harassment. Sarah is being manipulated by elderly woman with history of mental illness. Evidence Helen Crawford was hospitalized in 1987 for treatment of paranoid delusions. The children would be better served in stable environment with grandparents who can provide financial security, emotional support, and protection from their mother's increasingly erratic behavior. Sarah read the petition 3 times. Then she called Helen. They're saying you were hospitalized for paranoid delusions. Helen's laugh was bitter. In 1987, after Rose's son was killed, I told the police it was murder. They told me I was crazy. 30 days of mandatory psychiatric evaluation because I believed a rich family was capable of killing people. They're going to use it against us. Let them. I was right then. I'm right now, and I have 40 years of being right to prove it. Sarah wished she felt that confident. The custody hearing was scheduled for 4 weeks away. 4 weeks to prove she was a fit mother. 4 weeks to defend against accusations designed to destroy her credibility. 4 weeks before Victoria could legally take her children, and she was due to give birth in 6 weeks. The math didn't work. Something had to give. Robert arrived that evening with a strategy. We need to separate the cases, he said. The property litigation and the custody battle are being conflated deliberately. Victoria wants the judge to see you as an unstable woman pursuing conspiracy theories. What do? We prove you're not unstable. We prove the conspiracy theories are facts. Robert spread documents across the table. The Williams family journals corroborate Rose's timeline. The Martinez family has letters showing threats made by Harrison associates. The Jefferson family has photographs of the original property transfer documents, which clearly show forged signatures. That's evidence for the property case. How does it help custody? Because it proves you're not delusional. You're not pursuing imaginary crimes. You're documenting real historical injustice. A judge who sees that evidence will have a hard time ruling you mentally unstable. Jake appeared in the doorway. What if we show the judge everything? All of it, the murders too. Robert hesitated. The murder allegations are unproven. Introducing them could backfire, make you seem paranoid. But they're real. Jake's voice was tight with anger. They killed my father. They killed my grandmother. If we don't talk about it, we're letting them get away with it. Sarah looked at her son, 9 years old and carrying fury that would take a lifetime to resolve. Jake's right, she said quietly. If we hide from the truth, we become part of the cover-up. Even if we can't prove murder, we can show the pattern. The accidents that always happen to people who threaten Harrison interests. Let the judge draw their own conclusions." Robert considered for a long moment. "It's risky." "Everything about this is risky. At least this way we're fighting with truth instead of playing their games." The next 2 weeks were chaos. Sarah coordinated with Robert and the 17 family lawyers during morning hours. She interviewed descendants and gathered additional evidence during afternoons. She cared for her children during evenings, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy despite their lives being turned inside out. Emma had started a project she called the Stolen Gallery, portraits of every family member affected by Harrison crimes. She painted from photographs, adding color and life to faded black and white images. "When this is over," Emma said, "I want to display them somewhere, so people can see who was hurt. Not just numbers on documents, real faces, real people." Jake had appointed himself family security chief. He researched home alarm systems. He mapped escape routes from every room. He created a communication plan in case they got separated. "We need code words," he insisted. "If one of us is in trouble and can't talk freely, a word that means call for help immediately." Sarah wanted to tell him he was too young to worry about such things, but he'd already seen too much, knew too much. Pretending everything was normal would be a lie he'd never forgive. "Okay," she said. "What word magnolia? If any of us says magnolia in a conversation when it doesn't make sense, it means call 911. Helen came by daily, checking on their progress, bringing food, sharing memories of Rose that helped Sarah understand the legacy she was carrying. "Your grandmother never expected recognition," Helen said one evening. She knew she might die before seeing justice, but she kept documenting anyway, because she believed someone would eventually care, someone would eventually fight. Did she ever think it would be me? She hoped. Helen smiled softly. "She told me once that the most important inheritance isn't money or property. It's the courage to do right when doing right costs everything." Sarah pressed her hand against her belly. The baby kicked in response. "I hope I can live up to that." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Rachel Martinez, granddaughter of the family whose grocery store had been stolen, worked as a court reporter in Charlotte. She'd been following the case with growing interest, and she had information no one else could access. "I've transcribed Harrison depositions for years," she told Sarah during a secret meeting at a coffee shop. "Business disputes, contract negotiations, nothing criminal, but I've seen patterns." "What kind of patterns?" Rachel leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Charles Harrison, Victoria's husband. He's been funneling money to offshore accounts for decades. Millions of dollars. The family lawyers always object when anyone gets close to financial records, like they're protecting something. Money laundering. Maybe. Or maybe they're hiding where the original Harrison fortune came from, how they funded their early property acquisitions." Sarah felt pieces clicking together. The stolen properties. They used fraudulent loans to acquire them, but they needed capital to make those loans in the first place. Exactly. Where did that capital come from? I've never seen any documentation of Harrison family wealth before 1950. It's like they appeared out of nowhere with millions of dollars. Rose's documents don't cover that period. She started documenting in 1952. Then maybe there's more to find. Earlier crimes. The foundation their whole empire was built on. Sarah thought about the safe in Rose's study. The filing cabinets. The boxes of documents they still hadn't fully processed. I need to look again, go through everything one more time. The answer was in the journals. Rose had numbered them 1 through 40. They'd focused on Journal 27 because Rose's letter had specifically mentioned it, but that night Sarah read them all. Journal number 3, dated 1948, contained the key. Harrison family fortune originated with William Harrison Sr. during Prohibition, bootlegging operation that supplied half of North Carolina. When Prohibition ended, he needed to legitimize the money, began making predatory loans to immigrant families knowing they couldn't repay, seized their properties, claimed the land had been purchased legitimately, built an empire on blood money. Sarah read the entry 3 times. The Harrisons hadn't just stolen 17 properties. They'd built their entire fortune on organized crime. Everything that followed was an attempt to legitimize illegal wealth. The property theft was just the tip of the iceberg. Sarah called Robert at midnight. "I found something. Something that changes everything." "What is it?" "The Harrison fortune came from bootlegging during Prohibition. The property theft was how they laundered the money." Silence on the line. Then Robert's voice carefully controlled. "Can you prove it?" Rose documented the connection. Dates, names, transaction records that show money flowing from Prohibition-era accounts into property acquisitions. "Do you understand what this means? It means we're not just fighting for 17 families. We're fighting a criminal enterprise that's been operating for nearly a century. Robert exhaled slowly. This changes the legal strategy entirely. We're not talking about civil fraud anymore. We're talking about potential RICO violations, federal crimes. The FBI could get involved. Is that good? It's complicated. Federal involvement means more resources but less control. The case could grow beyond what we can manage. He paused. But it also means Victoria's threats might be less effective. Harder to intimidate witnesses when the federal government is watching. Sarah looked at her sleeping children through the doorway. Emma curled around her stuffed rabbit. Jake positioned near the door, ever vigilant, even in sleep. File it, whatever we need to file. Let's bring everything out into the open. 2 days later, the FBI called. Special Agent Denise Patterson arrived at the Magnolia Street house at 8 a.m. Professional suit, badge displayed, eyes that evaluated everything they touched. Mrs. Mitchell, I've been reviewing your attorney's submissions. The allegations are significant. They're not allegations, they're documented facts. I understand you feel that way. With respect, Agent Patterson, my grandmother spent 60 years collecting evidence. My mother spent 10 years building a legal case. Both of them died before they could see justice. I've spent the last month organizing their work and discovering crimes that go back to Prohibition. This isn't speculation, this is history. Patterson's expression remained neutral. The Bureau takes these matters seriously, but you should understand that investigating a family as prominent as the Harrisons requires substantial evidence. They have resources, lawyers, political connections. Any case we build needs to be airtight. Then let me show you what I have. Sarah spent 4 hours walking the FBI agent through Rose's documentation. The Prohibition connections, the property fraud, the pattern of deaths that followed anyone who threatened to expose the truth. By the end, Patterson's neutral expression had shifted to something like respect. Your grandmother was remarkable. She was determined. The Bureau will need time to verify these documents, authenticate the historical records, but I can tell you unofficially that what you've shown me is the most comprehensive evidence of generational financial crime I've ever seen. What happens now? Now we investigate. Quietly. The Harrisons can't know the FBI is looking at them or evidence will start disappearing. Patterson stood to leave. Mrs. Mitchell, I need to ask, have you experienced any direct threats? Anything that suggests the Harrisons know about this evidence? Sarah thought about Victoria's visit, the slap across her face, the promise that it wasn't over. Victoria Harrison came here personally. She told me she would do to me what she did to my mother and husband. She admitted to murder. She said she protected her family. The implication was clear. Patterson wrote something in her notebook. We'll add personal protection to our protocols. In the meantime, be careful. People like the Harrisons don't surrender easily. I know, that's why I'm not surrendering either. The custody hearing was 12 days away. Sarah's lawyer had prepared extensively. Character witnesses, financial documentation, evidence of stable home environment despite the chaos. But they all knew the real battle would be fought over Sarah's mental state. Victoria's lawyers had assembled a small army of expert witnesses. Psychologists prepared to testify about Sarah's supposed instability. Financial analysts ready to dissect her poverty. Social workers who would question her parenting choices. Emma and Jake would not be required to testify. The judge had ruled that putting children on the stand in custody disputes caused more harm than good, but they would be evaluated, interviewed by court-appointed psychologists who would assess their relationship with their mother and their grandmother. The evaluation was scheduled for Thursday. What do we say? Jake asked the night before. Do we tell them everything about the murders, about why we left Charlotte? Sarah knelt to his level. Tell them the truth. Whatever they ask, answer honestly. If they ask about Grandma Victoria, tell them how you feel. If they ask about our life here, describe it accurately. What if they think we're crazy? Then we'll deal with that together. But I don't think they will. I think they'll see two smart, brave kids who have been through terrible things and are handling it with incredible strength. Jake's jaw tightened. I don't feel strong. Neither do I, but we keep going anyway. That's what strength really is. Emma had been listening from the stairs. Mom, what happens if we have to go live with Grandma Victoria? The question Sarah had been dreading. That won't happen. But what if it does? Sarah pulled both children close. Then we fight to get back together, no matter how long it takes, no matter what we have to do. We are a family. Nobody can change that. Not courts, not judges, not Victoria Harrison. We belong together and we will find our way back to each other. She hoped she was telling the truth. The evaluation happened in a conference room at the courthouse. Dr. Patricia Coleman was the court-appointed psychologist. 50-something, warm eyes. Professional demeanor that masked whatever she was actually thinking. She interviewed Emma first. 45 minutes alone in the room. Sarah sat in the hallway fighting the urge to pace, trying to breathe through the anxiety crushing her chest. When Emma emerged, her face was unreadable. What did she ask? Everything. About Dad. About you. About Grandma Victoria. About the house and why we moved and what I think about all of it. What did you say? Emma shrugged. The truth. That I love you. That I'm scared sometimes. That I don't want to live with Grandma Victoria because she's mean and she wants to take us away from you. Did she seem to believe you? I don't know. She wrote a lot of notes. Jake's interview lasted an hour. He came out with red-rimmed eyes he was trying to hide. Sarah pulled him into a hug without asking questions. Sometimes children needed to process before they could talk. Finally, it was Sarah's turn. Doctor. Coleman's office was smaller than the conference room, more intimate. The kind of space designed to make people feel comfortable enough to reveal themselves. Mrs. Mitchell, thank you for being here. I don't feel like I had a choice. No, I suppose you didn't. Dr. Coleman consulted her notes. I want to start by saying your children are remarkable. Articulate, emotionally aware, clearly attached to you in healthy ways. Sarah felt some tension release. Thank you. But I need to address some concerns raised by the petitioner. Victoria Harrison claims you've exhibited unstable behavior, abandoning your home suddenly, exposing your children to dangerous situations, pursuing what she calls paranoid conspiracy theories. Did she mention that she threatened to take my children and told me she'd killed my mother and husband? Dr. Coleman's pen stopped moving. No, she didn't mention that. Victoria Harrison came to my house with hired men and told me if I didn't give up my children, she would destroy me. She admitted in front of my children that she had done the same to my mother and my husband. She slapped me across the face hard enough to leave a bruise. Sarah pulled out her phone, showed Dr. Coleman the photograph she'd taken after Victoria's attack. This was 2 weeks ago, when she found out I'd come to Asheville to claim my grandmother's house. Dr. Coleman studied the photograph. Did you report this to police? I did. They took a statement. Nothing has happened since. Sarah leaned forward. Dr. Coleman, I'm not pursuing conspiracy theories. I have 60 years of documentation proving the Harrison family committed systematic fraud and likely murdered multiple people, including my own mother. The FBI is investigating. 17 families have filed lawsuits. This isn't paranoia. This is reality. Silence stretched between them. You understand my position, Dr. Coleman said carefully. I'm tasked with evaluating what's best for your children, not with determining the guilt or innocence of the Harrison family. I understand, but Victoria's accusations about my mental state are part of her strategy to silence me. If she gets custody of my children, she gains leverage. I stop fighting, the evidence disappears, and 3 more deaths go uninvestigated. Dr. Coleman made several notes, then she looked up with an expression Sarah couldn't read. Your children told me they want to stay with you, that they're afraid of their grandmother, that they believe she's capable of hurting people. They've seen what she's capable of. They also told me you've tried to protect them from the worst of it, that you explain things at their level without scaring them more than necessary, that you make sure they still feel like children despite everything happening around them. Sarah felt tears threatening. I'm trying. It's hard. They've lost their father. They've been uprooted from everything familiar. They're watching their mother fight a war she might not win, but they're my children, and I will do everything in my power to give them stability and love and safety. Dr. Coleman closed her notebook. I'll be submitting my report to the judge before the hearing. I can't tell you what I'm going to recommend, but I can tell you that I've seen parents in far better circumstances who do far less for their children than you're doing right now. It wasn't a promise, but it felt like something close. The night before the hearing, Sarah went into labor. 6 weeks early, her body finally surrendering to the stress it had been fighting for months. Helen drove her to the hospital while Jake and Emma huddled in the back seat, terrified their mother was going to die like their father had died. I'm okay, Sarah gasped between contractions. The baby's just early. People have early babies all the time. Mom, you're squeezing my hand so hard it's turning purple. Sorry, Jake, sorry. The labor lasted 14 hours. Sarah refused to let Helen take the children home. They sat in the waiting room with cold vending machine sandwiches and growing fear while their mother screamed through contractions and fought to bring their sibling into the world. At 4:47 a.m., Rose Catherine Mitchell was born. 6 pounds, 2 ounces, healthy lungs, strong heartbeat. Perfect. Sarah held her daughter for the first time and cried with a mixture of exhaustion, relief, terror, and love so overwhelming that it felt like it might stop her heart. "Her name is Rose," she told Emma and Jake when they were finally allowed into the room. "Rose Catherine, after your great-great-grandmother who started all of this, and your grandmother who died trying to finish it." Emma touched her baby sister's tiny hand. "She's so small." "She'll grow." Sarah looked at her 3 children. Emma, Jake, Rose. "We all will." The custody hearing was postponed 2 weeks due to the birth. 2 weeks of recovery, 2 weeks of midnight feedings and healing, and trying to regain strength for the battle ahead. But the Harrisons didn't wait. Victoria filed an emergency motion while Sarah was still in the hospital, argued that Sarah's premature labor proved she was unable to handle the stress of parenting, demanded immediate temporary custody of Emma and Jake while the court determined permanent arrangements. Robert called with the news on Sarah's 3rd day in the hospital. "They're trying to take them while you can't fight back." Sarah stared at the ceiling, Rose sleeping against her chest, V still in her arm from the difficult delivery. "When the emergency hearing is tomorrow morning. I've filed opposition, but we need you there, in person, showing the judge you're coherent and capable. I just had a baby." "I know, I told the judge that. He said if you can't appear, he'll have to make a decision without your input." Sarah closed her eyes. Thought about her mother who had died fighting this battle. Thought about Rose who had spent 60 years waiting for someone to care enough to finish what she started. "I'll be there." She signed herself out of the hospital against medical advice. Helen drove her to the courthouse. Emma and Jake stayed with Rachel Martinez, who had become an unexpected ally and friend. Baby Rose slept in a carrier too young to understand the war being fought over her siblings. The courtroom felt enormous. Sarah's legs trembled as she walked to the front. Her body screamed for rest. Her stitches pulled with every step. But she was there. Victoria Harrison sat at the opposite table surrounded by lawyers in expensive suits. She looked at Sarah with an expression of pure contempt. The judge entered. "Given the emergency nature of this motion, I'll keep proceedings brief. Mrs. Harrison, you've requested immediate temporary custody of the minor children Emma and Jacob Mitchell. State your grounds." Victoria's lead attorney stood. "Your Honor, Mrs. Mitchell has demonstrated a pattern of erratic behavior that puts her children at risk. She abandoned her home in Charlotte without notice. She exposed her children to a dangerous living situation. She's pursuing litigation based on conspiracy theories that multiple experts have described as delusional. And 2 days ago, she experienced a premature labor event brought on by stress. She is clearly unable to provide stable care for her children." The judge turned to Sarah's side. "Response." Robert stood. "Your Honor, my client is present in this courtroom 2 days after giving birth, having signed herself out of the hospital against medical advice because Victoria Harrison is attempting to use legal process as a weapon. The erratic behavior described was Mrs. Mitchell fleeing her home after Mrs. Harrison physically assaulted her and threatened to take her children by force. The conspiracy theories are documented historical facts currently under FBI investigation, and the premature labor was caused by the stress of being attacked by a woman who has now admitted in sworn testimony to using violence against my client." "That's a lie." Victoria was on her feet. "Mrs. Harrison, sit down." The judge's voice was sharp. "You'll have your opportunity to respond." Sarah leaned toward her microphone. "Your Honor, may I speak?" "Briefly." Sarah stood slowly, holding the edge of the table for support. "I know I look weak right now. I just had a baby. I'm exhausted. I'm scared. And I'm fighting a family with more money and power than I will ever have." She turned to look at Victoria. "But I'm also a mother, and mothers do impossible things to protect their children. Victoria Harrison wants you to believe I'm unstable because I refuse to give up my children and disappear quietly. She wants you to believe I'm delusional because I have evidence of crimes her family committed for nearly a century. She wants you to believe I'm unfit because I won't stop fighting for justice." Sarah turned back to the judge. "I am none of those things. I'm a woman who lost her husband, who discovered everything she believed about her marriage was a lie, who found out her mother and grandmother were murdered for getting too close to the truth, and who decided that truth was worth fighting for no matter what it cost." She placed her hand on her chest, feeling her heart pounding beneath her fingers. "My children want to stay with me. They're afraid of their grandmother. They've seen what she's capable of. If you give them to her even temporarily, you're putting them in the hands of someone who has threatened to kill their mother. That's not protection. That's punishment for crimes I didn't commit." The courtroom fell silent. The judge studied Sarah for a long moment. Then he shuffled papers, made notes, finally spoke. "I've reviewed Dr. Coleman's psychological evaluation. She found no evidence of mental instability in Mrs. Mitchell. She found children who are clearly bonded to their mother and express fear of their grandmother. She recommended maintaining current custody arrangements." Victoria's face went white. "Furthermore, I've been made aware that the FBI has opened an investigation into the Harrison family based on evidence provided by Mrs. Mitchell. This suggests her claims are not delusional, but rather substantiated by federal authorities." The judge looked directly at Victoria. "Mrs. Harrison, I'm denying your emergency motion. The children will remain with their mother, and I'm issuing a restraining order preventing you from approaching Mrs. Mitchell or her children until the full custody hearing is concluded." Victoria stood so fast her chair fell backward. "You can't do this. Those are my grandchildren. I have rights." "You have the right to due process, which you will receive at the scheduled hearing." The judge's gaze was cold. "But I would advise you to spend the next 2 weeks reconsidering your approach. Because from where I sit, your attempts to use this court as a weapon are not reflecting well on your character." He banged his gavel. "Court is adjourned." Sarah made it to the hallway before her legs gave out. Robert caught her. Helen appeared with a wheelchair. Baby Rose woke and started crying, sensing her mother's distress. But Sarah was laughing. Crying and laughing at the same time. "We won," she whispered. "We actually won." "This round," Robert cautioned. "There's still the full hearing, the property cases, the FBI investigation." "I know," and Sarah wiped her eyes. "But today we won. Today my children are safe." Helen wheeled her toward the exit. "Rose would be proud of you. Rose gave me everything I needed, the evidence, the house, the foundation." As Sarah looked down at the baby in her arms named for the woman who had made all of this possible. She believed someone would eventually fight, believed someone would eventually care. And she was right. Sarah pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead. She was right. 2 weeks after the emergency hearing, Sarah finally slept through the night. Baby Rose had settled into a routine. Feeding at midnight, again at 4, then sleeping until 7, when Emma would creep into Sarah's room and lift her sister from the bassinet, cooing softly while Sarah grabbed another precious hour of rest. It wasn't peace. Peace felt impossible while the full custody hearing loomed and the FBI investigation continued, and Victoria Harrison remained somewhere out there planning her next attack. But it was something close to normal, and normal felt like a gift Sarah had stopped believing she deserved. The phone call came at 8 a.m. on a Thursday morning. Robert's voice was tight with urgency. "We have a problem." Sarah's stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "Charles Harrison had a heart attack last night. He's in intensive care. Victoria is claiming the stress of your lawsuit caused it." "That's ridiculous." "Ridiculous doesn't matter. What matters is public sympathy. The news is already running stories about the poor old man whose heart gave out because a vengeful daughter-in-law is trying to destroy his family." Sarah sank into a kitchen chair, her legs suddenly weak. "They're going to use this against me." "They're already using it. Victoria's lawyers filed a motion this morning. They want the custody hearing postponed indefinitely due to family medical emergency. They're also asking the judge to reconsider the restraining order so Victoria can have support from her grandchildren during this difficult time." "Support from my children? She threatened to kill me." "I know, but the narrative has shifted. You're not the sympathetic pregnant widow anymore. You're the woman who put an elderly man in the hospital." Sarah pressed her palm against her forehead, trying to think through the fog of exhaustion and fear. "What do? We stay calm. We don't respond emotionally. We let the facts speak for themselves." Robert paused. "But Sarah, there's something else. Something you need to know before you hear it from someone else." "What?" "Charles Harrison is talking to the FBI. Apparently, the heart attack scared him enough to start cooperating with the investigation." Sarah's breath caught. "He's turning on Victoria." "It looks that way. Agent Patterson called me an hour ago. Charles has been asking for immunity in exchange for testimony about the family's criminal activities going back decades." "What about David? Does he know anything about David's death?" "That's what Patterson wants to find out. But Charles is only willing to talk if he gets protection, not from prosecution, from his own wife." "No?" The words hung in the air like a revelation. Charles Harrison was afraid of Victoria. The man who had stood silently behind his wife for 40 years, enabling her cruelty, supporting her schemes, was now so terrified of her that he was willing to betray everything to escape. What does this mean for us? It means the case is about to blow wide open. It also means Victoria is going to become much more dangerous. When she finds out her husband is cooperating with the FBI, she'll have nothing left to lose. Sarah looked through the doorway at her children. Emma was helping Jake with homework at the kitchen table. Baby Rose slept in her carrier on the counter. Normal moments stolen between crises. Then we need to be ready. 3 days later, Victoria discovered her husband's betrayal. The news broke on a Sunday evening. FBI agents had been seen entering the Harrison estate. Charles Harrison had been transported to a federal facility for his protection. Victoria Harrison had been photographed screaming at attorneys in her driveway. Sarah watched the coverage with Helen and the children, feeling like she was observing the destruction of a dynasty in real time. "Good," Jake said flatly. "I hope she goes to prison forever." "Jake," Sarah's voice carried a warning. "What?" "She killed Dad. She killed Grandmother Catherine. She tried to take us away from you. Why shouldn't I want her to suffer?" Emma spoke quietly. "Because wanting people to suffer makes us like them, and we're not like them." Jake stared at his sister. "Sometimes I hate how smart you are." "I know. I hate it too sometimes." The phone rang. Unknown number. Sarah answered before she could stop herself. "You think you've won." Victoria's voice was ice and venom. "You think because my pathetic husband is talking to federal agents you've destroyed me." "Victoria, you're not supposed to contact me. There's a restraining order." "Restraining orders are paper. Paper burns." Victoria laughed, and the sound made Sarah's skin crawl. "I've spent 40 years building this family's power. I've eliminated every threat, every obstacle, every person who got in my way. Do you really think you're different?" "I think you're desperate." "I think you're naive. You have no idea what I'm capable of, what I've already done, what I'm willing to do." Victoria's voice dropped to a whisper. "Your mother begged Sarah. At the end, when she realized what was happening, she begged me to let her live. For you, for her daughter, who she'd never see grow up." Sarah's hand shook so badly she almost dropped the phone. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Ask yourself how I know about the scar on her left hand, the one she got when she was 14 falling off a bicycle, the one shaped like a crescent moon. Did anyone else know about that scar, Sarah? Anyone besides family?" Sarah couldn't breathe. Her mother's scar. She remembered tracing it as a child, asking how it happened, listening to the story of a summer afternoon and a bike with broken brakes. No one outside the family knew about that scar. "I was there when she died." Victoria's voice was almost gentle now. "I wanted to see her face when she understood, when she realized that all her work, all her evidence, all her planning was for nothing, that I would always win, that I would always be stronger." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to understand what's coming. Your mother thought she was safe. Your husband thought he was clever. They were both wrong. And when I'm done with you, when I've taken everything you love, when your children are calling me grandmother and they've forgotten you ever existed, I want you to remember this conversation. I want you to know that you were warned." The line went dead. Sarah sat frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear, Victoria's words echoing in her mind. "I was there when she died." Helen's hand on her shoulder made her jump. "Sarah, what happened? You're white as a sheet." "She confessed." Sarah's voice came out as a whisper. "Victoria just confessed to murdering my mother." Helen's face went pale. "Did you record it?" Sarah looked at her phone. The call log showed the number. The duration, 3 minutes and 47 seconds. But she hadn't been recording. "No, I didn't expect." "Then it's your word against hers." "She knew about my mother's scar. Something only family would know. Something she could only know if she was there." Helen's expression hardened. "Then we need to find another way to prove it." Sarah called Robert immediately. "She called you directly?" His voice was sharp with concern. "That's a violation of the restraining order." "Robert, she confessed. She told me she was there when my mother died. She described a scar on my mother's hand that no one outside the family knew about." Silence on the line. Then Robert spoke carefully. "Sarah, I believe you, but without a recording, without documentation, it's your word against hers. And her lawyers will claim you're fabricating the conversation to damage her case. Then what do I do? You document everything. Write down exactly what she said. Time, date, every detail you remember. We submit it to the judge as evidence of restraining order violation, and we wait. Wait for what? For Charles to finish talking to the FBI. If Victoria really killed your mother, there's a chance Charles knows about it. A chance he's willing to testify. Sarah thought about Charles Harrison, the silent man who stood behind his wife, the enabler who was now terrified enough to betray her. What if he doesn't know? Then we find another way. Robert's voice softened. Sarah, you've already accomplished more than Rose or Catherine ever could. You've exposed the Harrison crimes. You've united 17 families. You've gotten federal attention. Even if Victoria is never charged with murder, you've destroyed everything she spent her life building. It's not enough. I know, but sometimes justice comes in pieces, and sometimes the pieces are all we get. Emma's art show was scheduled for the following Saturday. The Asheville Community Center had agreed to host her stolen gallery as part of a local history exhibition, 17 portraits representing 17 families, faces of the past rendered in color and life by an 11-year-old girl who understood that justice required witnesses. Sarah almost canceled. After Victoria's phone call after the threats exposing her children in public felt like painting targets on their backs. But Emma refused. These families deserve to be seen. Her young voice carried conviction that belied her age. Grandma Rose spent her whole life making sure they wouldn't be forgotten. Great-grandmother Catherine died trying to tell their stories. I'm not going to hide because Victoria Harrison is scary. She's more than scary. She's dangerous. So were the people who tried to stop Rosa Parks. So were the people who tried to stop Martin Luther King. But they didn't stop. Emma met her mother's eyes with a gaze that made Sarah's heart ache. You taught me that. You taught me that doing right is more important than being safe. Sarah pulled her daughter into a hug. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. The gallery opening drew more people than anyone expected. Word had spread about the Harrison case. Local media covered the exhibition. Descendants of the 17 families traveled from across North Carolina to see their ancestors' faces on display. Marcus Williams stood in front of his grandfather's portrait for nearly an hour, tears streaming down his weathered face. His children and grandchildren gathered around him, learning for the first time the full story of what had been stolen. She made him look proud, Marcus said to Sarah. In all the photographs I have, he looks beaten, defeated, but Emma painted him the way he must have looked before, when he still believed in the American dream. He deserved to be remembered that way. He did. They all did. Marcus turned to face her. I've been talking to the other families, all 17 of us. We've decided something. What? Whatever money we get from the settlement, we're putting half of it into a trust for the next generation, for education and business loans and housing assistance. So what was stolen from us becomes something that lifts our children up instead of weighing them down. Sarah felt tears threatening. That's exactly what Rose would have wanted. That's what Rose taught us, through you, through all of this. Marcus clasped her hand. Thank you for not giving up, for fighting when everyone told you it was impossible. I had help, 60 years of help from a woman I never met. And now you're the one leaving help for the next 60 years. That's how it works. That's how we win. Not all at once. Generation by generation. The attack came at 7:47 p.m. as the gallery was beginning to empty. Sarah was talking to a reporter when she heard Emma scream. She ran without thinking, pushing through the crowd, her postpartum body protesting every step. She found Emma in the side hallway, Jake standing in front of her with his fists raised, facing a man Sarah had never seen before. Get away from them, the man turned. 40s, hard eyes, professional bearing, something silver glinting in his hand. Mrs. Mitchell. His voice was calm, controlled. Victoria Harrison sends her regards. There are 50 people in this building, cameras everywhere. Whatever you're planning, you won't get away with it. I'm not planning anything. He smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. I'm delivering a message. Victoria wants you to know that no restraining order, no FBI investigation, no amount of publicity will protect your children from her reach. He opened his hand. The silver glint was a pendant, a small rose identical to the one Rose Chen had worn in photographs, the one that had been buried with her. Sarah's blood went cold. Where did you get that? Victoria has connections everywhere, even in graveyards. He dropped the pendant at Sarah's feet. She wanted you to know that nothing is sacred. Nothing is protected. Not your grandmother's grave. Not your children. Not you. He walked away before Sarah could respond. disappeared into the crowd, gone before security could be summoned. Emma was shaking. Jake's fists were still raised, his face white with fury. Sarah picked up the pendant with trembling hands. It was real. Rose's pendant, which meant Victoria had actually desecrated her grandmother's grave just to send a message. "Mom," Jake's voice was tight. "We need to go. Now." They left through the back entrance. Helen was waiting with the car baby Rose already strapped into her carrier. They drove in silence to the Magnolia Street house where Robert and Agent Patterson were already waiting. "She violated the restraining order again," Patterson's voice was grim. "Between the phone call and this, we have grounds to arrest her." "Then arrest her." "We will. But Sarah, there's something you should know first." Patterson exchanged a glance with Robert. "Charles Harrison finished his deposition this morning. He's provided testimony about Victoria's involvement in multiple crimes spanning 4 decades. Including murder," Patterson nodded slowly. "Including murder. Charles claims Victoria personally arranged the deaths of at least 5 people who threatened to expose Harrison family crimes. Your mother was one of them. Your husband was another." Sarah's knees buckled. Robert caught her, helped her to a chair. "He has proof. He has knowledge. Details about how the deaths were arranged. Names of people Victoria hired. Payment records hidden in offshore accounts." Patterson leaned forward. "Sarah, we're going to arrest Victoria Harrison tonight. Not just for restraining order violation, for conspiracy to commit murder. Multiple counts." The words felt unreal. After months of fighting, after generations of injustice, after watching her mother and husband die without understanding why. Justice was actually coming. What happens now? Now we build the case. Charles will testify. The financial records will corroborate his testimony. Between that and Rose's documentation, we have enough to prosecute. Will she go to prison? If convicted, for the rest of her life. Sarah looked at her children. Emma was still shaking, clutching her sketchbook like a shield. Jake stood rigid, processing information that would take years to fully understand. Baby Rose slept peacefully, unaware that her birth had happened in the middle of a war that was finally ending. "My mother," Sarah said quietly. "Can you prove what happened to her?" Patterson's expression softened. "Charles has provided testimony about your mother's death specifically. Victoria arranged for her car to be sabotaged. The tire blowout wasn't an accident, it was murder. 16 years. For 16 years, Sarah had believed her mother died in a random accident, had grieved without anger, had moved on without justice. Now she knew, and knowing felt like being torn open and put back together at the same time. And David. Similar arrangement. Victoria became concerned that David was developing genuine feelings for you, that he might warn you about her plans. She decided he was more useful dead than alive. "He loved me," Sarah's voice cracked. "Despite everything, despite the lies, he actually loved me." Charles believes so, yes. He says David started questioning his assignment about 2 years before his death. Started talking about confessing everything to you. Victoria saw that as betrayal. Sarah covered her face with her hands. David. Her David. Not the willing pawn she'd believed him to be. A man who'd started as a Harrison tool but ended as someone who loved her enough to die for it. She didn't know if that made the betrayal better or worse. The arrest happened at 11:47 p.m. Sarah watched the news coverage from her living room, Helen on one side, her children on the other. Baby Rose slept in her arms, oblivious to the history unfolding on screen. Victoria Harrison walked out of her estate in handcuffs. Head held high, face arranged in an expression of contempt that suggested she still believed she was untouchable. FBI agents flanked her, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions she didn't answer. Victoria Harrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. You have the right to remain silent. Emma spoke first. Is it over? Sarah watched Victoria disappear into a federal vehicle. The arrest is just the beginning. There will be a trial, lawyers, appeals. It might take years. But she's going to prison. Yes, eventually, yes. Jake's voice was hard. Good. I hope she rots there. Jake, I know what Emma said, about not wanting people to suffer, about not being like them. He looked at his mother with eyes that had seen too much. But she killed Dad. She killed Grandmother Catherine. She tried to destroy us. I'm not sorry she's going to suffer. I'm not. Sarah pulled her son close. You don't have to be sorry. You don't have to forgive. You just have to keep living. Keep being better than the anger. That's how we win, not by being perfect, by being present. Yet, the full custody hearing took place 3 weeks later. Victoria Harrison appeared via video link from federal detention. Her lawyers argued for dismissal of the custody petition given that their client was facing murder charges and unlikely to be available to care for children. The judge dismissed the petition with prejudice. Sarah walked out of the courtroom with her children legally, permanently, irrevocably hers. Emma held her right hand. Jake held her left. Helen walked behind them carrying baby Rose in her arms. "We won," Emma said softly. "We actually won. We did more than win." Sarah looked at her children at the future that had seemed impossible just months ago. We survived, we fought, and we're still standing. The property cases settled 6 weeks after Victoria's arrest. 17 families, $27 million in restoration and compensation. Properties returned to rightful heirs. Financial damages paid from Harrison accounts frozen by federal order. The settlement ceremony took place at the Asheville Community Center in the same room where Emma's gallery had been displayed. All 17 families gathered, cameras recorded, history was witnessed. Sarah spoke last. 60 years ago, a woman named Rose Chen started documenting crimes she knew might never be punished. 30 years ago, her granddaughter Catherine continued that work. Both of them died before seeing justice. She looked at the faces surrounding her. Descendants of families destroyed by Harrison greed. People who had grown up in poverty created by theft they didn't know had happened. A community that had suffered in silence for generations. Today we finish what they started. Not because revenge is sweet, not because money fixes everything, but because truth matters. Because stolen things should be returned. Because the people who are supposed to protect us, the banks and the courts and the officials, failed our families. And when institutions fail, ordinary people have to step up. Sarah held up Rose's pendant, recovered from evidence, and returned to her possession. Rose believed someone would eventually care enough to fight. Catherine believed justice would eventually come. They were both right. It just took longer than anyone wanted. She looked at her children. Emma with her art. Jake with his determination. Baby Rose named for the woman who had made all of this possible. The real inheritance was never money or property. It was the courage to do right when doing right costs everything. That's what Rose left us. That's what Catherine left us. And that's what we're leaving for the next generation. The applause that followed felt like healing. 6 months later, Victoria Harrison pleaded guilty to avoid trial. 3 counts of conspiracy to commit murder. Multiple counts of fraud. Money laundering. Obstruction of justice. The plea deal gave her 35 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. She would die behind bars. Sarah received the news from Robert while sitting in Rose's study surrounded by journals and photographs and 60 years of documentation that had finally fulfilled its purpose. "How do you feel?" Robert asked. Sarah considered the question. "I thought I would feel satisfied, vindicated, something powerful. But mostly I feel tired and sad. For my mother who never got to see this. For David who might have become a good man if he'd been given the chance. For all the years we lost to fear and lies and violence." Robert sat across from her. "You accomplished something remarkable. You took down a criminal empire that had been operating for nearly a century. You restored millions of dollars to families who were robbed. You got justice for your mother and your husband. Most people would consider that a victory." "It is a victory. It just doesn't feel like I thought victory would feel." "What did you think it would feel like?" Sarah looked at the photograph on the desk. Rose and Catherine. 2 women who had spent their lives fighting a battle they would never win. "I thought it would feel like ending. Like closing a chapter. But it feels more like beginning. Like everything that comes next matters more than everything that came before." Robert smiled. "That's because you're not done. The foundation still needs leadership. The families still need support. The next Rose Chen is out there somewhere fighting a battle that feels impossible. Someone has to show her it's worth the fight." "Is that what I'm supposed to do now? Show people that fighting matters?" "That's what Rose did. That's what Catherine did. It's what you've been doing all along, whether you realized it or not." Sarah picked up Rose's pendant, feeling its weight in her palm. "Then I guess I better get started." The summer that followed was the first peaceful summer Sarah could remember. Emma enrolled in a proper art program, her talent recognized and nurtured by teachers who saw genius where others had seen a sad child drawing in notebooks. Her stolen gallery became a traveling exhibition displayed in schools and community centers across North Carolina, teaching children about historical injustice and the power of perseverance. Jake joined a youth leadership program focused on community advocacy. His analytical mind found purpose in organizing fundraisers and coordinating volunteer efforts for families still struggling with the aftermath of generational theft. Baby Rose grew into a laughing, curious child who had no idea she was named for a warrior, who knew only that she was loved by her mother and siblings and a community that had adopted her as their own. Helen remained, the 70-something keeper of secrets who had waited decades for someone to care enough to fight. She moved into the guest room at the Magnolia Street house, becoming grandmother and guardian and historian all at once, and Sarah discovered something she hadn't expected. Peace. Not the absence of struggle, not the end of work, but a quieting of the fear that had driven her for so long. A sense that whatever came next, she could handle it, that she was no longer alone, that the inheritance she'd received was not a burden, but a gift. The Magnolia Foundation grew beyond anything Rose could have imagined. Support programs for families affected by predatory lending, legal aid for people fighting institutional corruption, educational scholarships for children of the 17 families. Sarah ran it all from Rose's study, the same room where her grandmother had spent 60 years documenting crimes, the same room where her mother had been building her case when she was murdered, the same room where Sarah had discovered the truth about her husband and her heritage and herself. It felt like continuation, like the story that had started a century ago was still being written and Sarah was just the latest author. Marcus Williams stopped by on a September afternoon. He brought his granddaughter, a 7-year-old named Rose, named for the woman who had made justice possible for her family. "I wanted you to meet her," Marcus said. "I wanted her to meet you, so she knows who to thank when she's old enough to understand." Sarah knelt to the little girl's level. "Hello, Rose, that's a beautiful name." "My grandpa says I'm named after a hero, a lady who fought bad guys for a long time." "Your grandpa is right. She was very brave." "Are you brave?" Sarah smiled. "I try to be, every day." "My grandpa says you saved our family, that we would still be poor if you hadn't fought the bad guys." Sarah looked at Marcus, whose eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Your family saved themselves, she said carefully. "I just helped them remember what was taken. They did the rest." Little Rose considered this. "Can I be brave like you when I grow up?" "You can be braver. You can be stronger. You can be anything you want to be because you're starting from a place of truth instead of lies. That's the best inheritance anyone can give." The girl nodded solemnly, then ran off to play with Emma in the garden. Marcus watched her go. "She's the future. All the children are the future. That's what this was really about. Not money, not property, not even justice. It was about making sure the next generation starts from a better place than we did. Rose knew that. 60 years ago, she knew. And now you know, and you'll teach your children, and they'll teach theirs." Marcus turned to face Sarah. "The Harrisons thought they could bury the truth by killing the people who knew it. They never understood that truth is like a seed. You can bury it, but it just grows." Sarah thought about her mother, about David, about all the people who had died fighting this battle. Some seeds take a long time to grow, but they always grow, eventually, if someone cares enough to water them. Sarah looked at her garden where children played among flowers that Rose Chen had planted decades ago, where seeds of justice had finally bloomed into something beautiful. "Then I guess we better keep watering." 14 months after Victoria Harrison's arrest, Sarah received a letter from federal prison. She recognized the handwriting immediately, elegant cursive that had once signed Christmas cards and birthday checks. Handwriting that belonged to a woman who had murdered Sarah's mother and husband and tried to steal her children. Sarah's first instinct was to burn it unread, but something stopped her. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the need for closure that had eluded her despite all the victories. Maybe just the exhaustion of carrying anger for so long. She opened the envelope. "Sarah, I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer. The doctors give me 3 months, maybe less. I could have kept this to myself, let you find out when it was already over. But I've spent the past year in a cell with nothing to do but think, and I've realized something. I was wrong about you. I thought you were weak. A nobody who got lucky enough to trap my son. I spent 12 years trying to break you, and I failed. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. I'm not writing to apologize. I don't expect forgiveness, and I wouldn't accept it if you offered. What I did was unforgivable. I know that. But before I die, I need you to know something. Something I've never told anyone." something that might change how you think about everything. David loved you, not at first. At first, it was a job. But somewhere along the way, he fell, hard. He came to me 2 years before his death and begged me to let him tell you the truth. He said he'd rather lose everything than keep lying to you. I refused. I told him the mission was more important than his feelings, that if he betrayed the family, there would be consequences. He chose you anyway. He started secretly gathering evidence against us. He was going to expose everything, give you proof of what Rose had documented, help you destroy us from the inside. That's why I had him killed, not because he failed his mission, because he succeeded at becoming something better than I raised him to be. Your husband died a hero. He just never got the chance to tell you. I thought you should know. Victoria, Sarah read the letter 7 times. Then she locked herself in Rose's study and cried for 3 hours. David. Her David. Not the villains she'd been forced to see him as. Not the Harrison puppet who'd deceived her for 11 years. A man who had started as an enemy and ended as an ally, who had died trying to protect her, who had loved her enough to betray everything he'd been raised to believe. Emma found her at sunset. Mom, Helen said you've been in here all day. Are you okay? Sarah looked at her daughter through swollen eyes. I got a letter from Victoria. Emma's face went hard. What did she want? To tell me the truth about your father. Sarah held out the letter. You should read it. Emma read slowly, her expression shifting from suspicion to confusion to something that looked like grief. Dad was going to tell you he was gathering evidence. That's what she says. Do you believe her? Sarah considered the question. Victoria was many things. Cruel, calculating, murderous, but she had no reason to lie now, not with 3 months to live, not with everything already lost. I think I do. Then Dad wasn't... Emma's voice broke. He wasn't bad. He just made bad choices and then tried to fix them. Something like that. Emma set down the letter and climbed into Sarah's lap the way she used to when she was small. Too big for it now, almost 12, but needing the comfort of childhood in a moment that demanded too much of her adult understanding. I'm glad, Emma whispered. I'm glad he loved us for real, even if he couldn't tell us. Sarah held her daughter and let herself grieve properly for the first time. Not for the husband she'd thought she lost. For the husband she'd actually lost. The one who had died trying to do the right thing. The one who deserved to be remembered as something other than a betrayer. Jake's reaction was different. He read Victoria's letter in silence, his 14-year-old face unreadable. When he finished, he handed it back to Sarah without a word. Jake, talk to me. What do you want me to say? Anything. What you're feeling. What you're thinking. Jake's jaw tightened. I'm thinking that she's manipulating you, from prison, dying and she's still trying to mess with your head. You think she's lying? I think it doesn't matter if she's lying. Dad's dead. He was part of a plan to destroy our family. Whether he changed his mind at the end doesn't erase the 11 years of lies. Sarah reached for her son's hand. He let her take it, but didn't squeeze back. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. I'm not angry. Jake's voice was flat. I'm done. Done thinking about Dad. Done thinking about Victoria. Done trying to make sense of people who made choices I'll never understand. Jake, Mom, you need to let this go. Whatever Dad did or didn't do, whatever he felt or didn't feel, it doesn't change anything. He's gone. Victoria's going to die in prison. The only thing that matters now is us, our family, our future. Sarah looked at her son, seeing the man he was becoming. Harder than she would have chosen, more guarded, but strong in ways that would serve him well. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher, multiple teachers. Jake's expression softened slightly. Mom, I'm not saying you shouldn't grieve. I'm saying don't let Victoria control how you grieve. She's taken enough from us. Don't give her your peace, too. He walked away, leaving Sarah with a letter that had somehow made everything more complicated instead of simpler. Marcus Williams became a regular presence over the following months. At first, it was foundation business. The 17 families needed coordination, resources needed allocation, programs needed oversight. Marcus, as the unofficial leader of the descendant families, worked closely with Sarah on all of it. But somewhere between budget meetings and community events, something shifted. Sarah noticed it first in small things. The way Marcus brought her coffee without being asked. The way he remembered details about Emma's art and Jake's advocacy work. The way his hand lingered on her shoulder when they discussed difficult topics. Helen noticed it too. That man is in love with you, she said one evening after Marcus had left. Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. Don't be ridiculous. We're colleagues. Colleagues don't look at each other the way he looks at you. Colleagues don't find excuses to stop by every other day. Colleagues don't remember that you take your coffee with 2 sugars and exactly 1 cream. He's just attentive. He's courting you, old-fashioned style, the way men used to do it when respect meant something. Sarah thought about David, about the lies that had defined their relationship, about the love that had apparently been real despite being born from deception. I don't know if I'm ready. Ready for what? To be happy to let someone care about you without wondering if they have an ulterior motive. Helen's voice softened. Sarah, you've spent the past 2 years fighting. You've earned the right to live. Really live. Not just survive. What if I let him in and he turns out to be another lie? What if you don't let him in and you spend the rest of your life alone? Helen touched Sarah's hand. Rose spent 60 years fighting. She died alone with nothing but her journals and her regrets. Catherine spent her last decade obsessed with justice. She never had time for love, never made room for anything but the mission. Don't repeat their mistakes. You've already won the war. Now learn how to enjoy the peace. The first time Marcus kissed her was 3 weeks later. They were standing in Rose's garden discussing plans for a memorial to be built on the site of the original Chen grocery store. The sun was setting. Baby Rose was laughing somewhere inside the house. Emma and Jake were arguing about something teenage and irrelevant. Normal life. The kind Sarah had almost forgotten existed. Marcus stopped mid-sentence. Sarah. Yes. I need to tell you something. Her heart accelerated. Okay. I've been coming here every day for 6 months, finding reasons to call you, making excuses to stay longer than necessary. He took her hands in his. I've been falling in love with you and I'm tired of pretending I'm not. Sarah's breath caught. Marcus? I know it's complicated. I know you've been through hell. I know you might not be ready, but I'm 64 years old, and if there's anything this whole experience has taught me, it's that waiting for the perfect moment is a good way to miss the moment entirely. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to be with you, not as your colleague, not as your fellow traveler in this crazy justice journey, as your partner, your companion, someone who makes your life better just by being in it. Sarah thought about all the reasons to say no, the age difference, the complication of their shared history, the fear that she'd forgotten how to love without suspicion. Then she thought about all the reasons to say yes, and she kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative. 2 people who had learned that vulnerability was dangerous, allowing themselves to be vulnerable anyway. Then it deepened into something real, something that felt like the beginning of a story instead of the end of one. When they finally broke apart, Marcus was smiling. I'll take that as a yes. It's a maybe, a strong maybe. I'll take a strong maybe. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. We can go slow as you need. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Promise. Jake's reaction to the relationship was complicated. He watched Marcus with the suspicious eyes of a teenager who had learned that men who said they loved his mother couldn't always be trusted. He asked pointed questions about Marcus's intentions. He researched Marcus's background on the internet looking for red flags. I don't like it, he announced one evening after Marcus had left. Sarah sighed. Jake, we've talked about this. You've talked. I've listened. That's not the same thing. Jake crossed his arms. How do you know he's not using you? How do you know this isn't another Harrison scheme? Because the Harrisons are gone. Victoria is dying in prison. Charles is in witness protection. Their empire is dismantled. There could be others, people we don't know about, people waiting to finish what Victoria started. Sarah sat down across from her son. Jake, I understand why you're scared. After everything that happened with your father, trusting anyone feels dangerous. But I can't live the rest of my life assuming everyone who cares about me is lying. Why not? At least you'd be safe. Would I? Would I really be safe locked away from everyone, never letting anyone close, or would I just be a different kind of prisoner? Jake's jaw tightened. I just don't want you to get hurt again. I know, and I love you for protecting me, but protecting me doesn't mean keeping me from living. It means supporting me while I take risks, even when those risks scare you. What if Marcus turns out to be another David? Then we'll deal with it, together, like we've dealt with everything else. Sarah reached for her son's hand. Jake, I've spent 2 years teaching you that courage means doing the right thing even when it's scary. Love is the same. It means opening your heart even when it might get broken. I can't ask you to be brave if I'm not willing to be brave myself. Jake was silent for a long moment, then reluctantly he nodded. Fine, but if he hurts you, I'm going to destroy him. Duly noted. I mean it. I've learned a lot about legal strategy in the past 2 years. I could make his life very difficult. Sarah laughed, pulling her son into a hug. I'm sure you could. Emma's reaction was easier. Finally, she said when Sarah told her about Marcus. I was starting to think you two would never figure it out. You knew? Mom, everyone knew. Helen knew. The foundation board knew. Pretty sure baby Rose knew, and she can barely talk. Emma grinned. I've been rooting for Marcus since the day he cried in front of his grandfather's portrait. Any man who loves his family that much is worth keeping. You're supposed to be the cautious one, the protective daughter. I'm the one who paints people's emotions for a living. I can see what you feel when he's in the room. You light up. You haven't lit up like that since before Dad died. Emma's expression turned serious. You deserve to be happy, Mom. You've spent so long fighting for everyone else. Let someone fight for you for a change. Sarah hugged her daughter. When did you become the adult in this relationship? Probably around the time I started painting murdered people's portraits to expose generational theft. That kind of thing ages you. The engagement came 6 months later. Marcus proposed in Rose's study, surrounded by the journals and documents that had brought them together. He got down on one knee with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, a woman who had lost everything to Harrison greed and rebuilt her life with nothing but determination and love. This ring has been in my family for 4 generations, Marcus said. My grandmother gave it to my mother gave it to me and told me to give it to someone worthy, someone who understood that family means fighting for each other no matter the cost. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. Marcus, you've already proven you're that person. You've proven it 100 times over. Now I'm asking you to let me spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. Yes. The word came out before she could overthink it, before she could list all the reasons to be careful to wait to protect herself from potential heartbreak. Just yes. Marcus slid the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. The wedding was scheduled for the following spring. Small ceremony. Just family and the 17 descendant families who had become their extended community. Helen would officiate, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion, but 3 weeks before the wedding, everything changed. Sarah received a phone call at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Dr. Patterson from the Federal Medical Center. I'm calling about Victoria Harrison. Sarah's stomach dropped. Is she dead? Not yet, but she's asking to see you. She says there's something else she needs to tell you, something she couldn't put in a letter. I don't want to see her. I understand, but Mrs. Mitchell, she's asking for you specifically. She's refusing her medication until you agree to visit. The doctors believe she has days, possibly hours left. Why should I care if she refuses medication? Because she claims to have information about additional Harrison crimes. Crimes that were never prosecuted. Crimes that might affect people who are still alive. Sarah closed her eyes. Just when she thought it was over. Just when she'd finally found peace. What kind of crimes? She won't say, only that she'll tell you and no one else. Why me? I don't know. She says you're the only one who will understand. Sarah thought about her wedding, about the life she was building with Marcus, about the peace she'd finally found after so many years of war. Then she thought about the other families, the other victims, the people who might still be suffering because of Harrison crimes that had never been exposed. Fine, I'll come. The federal medical facility was 2 hours from Asheville. Sarah drove alone despite Marcus's insistence that he accompany her. This was something she needed to face by herself. One final confrontation with the woman who had shaped so much of her life through destruction. Victoria Harrison looked nothing like the elegant predator Sarah remembered. She was skeletal, yellow, barely recognizable as the woman who had slapped Sarah across the face and promised to destroy her. The cancer had consumed everything, leaving behind the husk that could barely lift its head from the pillow. You came. Victoria's voice was a whisper. I wasn't sure you would. Sarah sat in the chair beside the bed, maintaining distance. You said you had information about other crimes. Always so direct. I admired that about you even when I hated you for it. Victoria coughed a wet sound that suggested her lungs were failing. There's a folder in the safe deposit box at First National Bank in Charlotte. Key is in my lawyer's possession. I've already authorized him to give it to you. What's in the folder? Names, dates, amounts. The Harrisons weren't the only family involved in the property theft. We had partners. Other wealthy families, Bede families who participated in the scheme, who profited from it, who are still profiting from it today. Sarah felt cold spread through her chest. How many families? 7. 7 families who were just as guilty as we were, who got away with it because no one knew to look for them. Why are you telling me this? Victoria's eyes still sharp despite the failing body fixed on Sarah. Because I'm dying, and I've realized something that took me too long to understand. What? Legacy isn't about money. It's not about power or property or all the things I spent my life accumulating, Victoria's voice cracked. Legacy is about what people say about you when you're gone, what they remember, what they teach their children. She coughed again, blood appearing at the corner of her mouth. I spent my whole life building an empire, and what do I have to show for it? My husband betrayed me, my grandchildren hate me, I'll be remembered as a murderer, a monster. Everything I built will be associated with my crimes. You earned that legacy. I know, that's my point. Victoria reached out her skeletal hand, grasping at air until Sarah reluctantly took it. You have a chance to build something different, something that lasts, not through theft and murder, but through justice and love. I don't need your advice on how to live my life. No, you don't. You've already figured it out better than I ever did. Victoria's grip tightened weakly. But you do need the names in that folder, because the 7 families who helped us, they're still out there, still wealthy, still powerful, still profiting from crimes that destroyed your community. Why give this to me? Why not the FBI? Why not your lawyers? Because the FBI will bury it. Too many powerful people involved. Too many connections to current politicians and business leaders. Victoria smiled, and it was the first genuine expression Sarah had ever seen on her face. But you won't bury it. You'll fight. You'll expose them. You'll make sure everyone knows what they did. Why do you care? Because destroying the people who are supposed to be my allies is the only revenge I have left. Victoria's voice hardened. They abandoned me. When the FBI came, when the case fell apart, not one of them offered support. Not one of them tried to help. They let me take the fall alone while they protected themselves. So this is about revenge. Partly, but it's also about... Victoria paused, seeming to search for words. Completion. Rose Chen spent 60 years trying to expose the truth. Your mother spent 10 years building a case. They both died before they could finish. I'm giving you the chance to finish it. All of it. Not just the Harrison crimes, but the entire conspiracy. Sarah looked at the dying woman before her, the murderer, the monster, the grandmother her children feared, and she saw something she hadn't expected. Honesty. Real, genuine honesty from someone who had spent her entire life lying. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't, but you should trust the evidence. It's all documented. Bank records, property transfers, communication logs, everything you need to destroy 7 more families and return 23 more properties to their rightful owners. 23 more properties. 40 in total. Rose only knew about 17. The others were better hidden, more careful, but I had access to records she never saw. Victoria's eyes closed briefly. I'm dying, Sarah. I have nothing left to gain from lying. I just want to see it all burn. Sarah released Victoria's hand, stood, walked to the window. 40 properties, 7 families. 27 million more in stolen wealth. The battle she thought was over had only been half fought. I'll take the folder. I know, but not because you asked me to, because the families who were robbed deserve justice, whether they know about me or not. Victoria nodded weakly. I would expect nothing less. Sarah turned back. Is there anything else? Just one thing. Victoria's voice was fading now, energy depleted. Your husband, David. What I told you in the letter was true. All of it. He loved you. He died trying to protect you. And I'm sorry I took him from you. You're sorry. I'm not apologizing. I don't expect forgiveness, but I am sorry for what it's worth. Victoria's eyes closed. He was a good man, better than I raised him to be. You made him better. Sarah stood over the woman who had destroyed so much of her life, the woman who had murdered her mother, her husband, who had tried to steal her children and bury the truth forever. Goodbye, Victoria. Goodbye, Sarah. Give them hell. Sarah walked out of the hospital room. She never looked back. Victoria Harrison died 3 hours later. Sarah received the call while driving home. She pulled over to the side of the road and sat in silence for a long time, processing the strange mixture of emotions that flooded through her. Relief, grief, anger, and something that might have been gratitude. She called Marcus. It's over, she said when he answered. Victoria's dead. How do you feel? I don't know. Complicated. Sarah took a deep breath. She gave me something. Information about other families involved in the property theft. 7 more families. 23 more properties. Marcus was silent for a moment. You're going to pursue it? I have to. I know. His voice was warm with understanding. That's who you are. That's who I fell in love with. Someone who fights for justice even when the fighting should be over. Are you okay with that? The wedding is in 3 weeks. I don't want to spend our first months of marriage buried in another legal battle. Sarah, I married into a family that was robbed by people like the Harrisons. My grandfather died in poverty because of what they stole. If there are other families out there who suffered the same way, how could I ask you to ignore that? You could ask. I might not listen, but you could ask. Marcus laughed softly. I'm not going to ask. I'm going to help. Whatever you need. Research, outreach, someone to hold your hand when the fight gets hard. I'm in. Sarah felt tears threatening again. I love you. I love you too. Now come home. Your children are worried, and Helen is making dinner, and we have a wedding to finish planning. I'm on my way. The folder arrived 3 days before the wedding. It was thicker than Sarah expected. Hundreds of pages of documentation, property records, bank transfers, communication logs dating back to the 1950s, 7 families, 23 properties, $27 million in additional stolen wealth. Sarah spread the documents across Rose's desk and started reading. The names jumped out at her. Old Charlotte families, pillars of the community, people who served on charitable boards and funded hospital wings and had buildings named after them. People who had participated in the systematic destruction of 17 additional families while maintaining their reputations as upstanding citizens. Emma found her at midnight, still reading. Mom, you need to sleep. Your wedding is in 3 days. I know, Sarah gestured at the papers surrounding her. Look at this, all of it. Victoria was right. The Harrisons weren't alone. They were part of a network, a conspiracy of wealthy families who worked together to steal from people who couldn't fight back. Emma sat down across from her mother. Are you going to expose them? I have to, but not now, not before the wedding. Sarah gathered the papers into a pile. After. When the honeymoon is over. When life settles down. Then I'll start the next fight. And if they fight back, the way Victoria did, then we'll handle it the way we handled Victoria. Sarah reached across the desk to take her daughter's hand. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Okay? Are you tired of this? The fighting, the legal battles, the constant stress of being part of something bigger than ourselves. Emma considered the question. Sometimes I wish we were just a normal family, that we could have boring problems like everyone else. Car repairs and college applications and deciding where to go on vacation. But then I remember why we fight. The families who lost everything. The children who grew up in poverty because of what was stolen. The people who died without ever knowing the truth about what happened to them. Emma squeezed her mother's hand. I don't want to be normal. I want to be useful. And right now, this is the most useful thing I can imagine being. Sarah felt pride swell in her chest. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. The wedding day dawned clear and warm. Sarah stood in Rose's study wearing a simple white dress that Helen had helped her choose. The dress Catherine had worn to her own wedding, preserved in a cedar chest for 30 years, altered to fit Sarah's slightly different frame. You look beautiful. Helen's voice was thick with emotion. Rose would be so proud. You think... I know, she spent 60 years fighting alone. She never imagined someone would continue her work. Never imagined the fight would actually be won. Helen adjusted Sarah's veil. She's watching right now, her and Catherine both, celebrating with us. Emma appeared in the doorway wearing a blue dress that matched her grandmother's eyes. Mom, it's time. Sarah took a deep breath, looked around the study one last time, at Rose's journals on the shelves, at Catherine's case files in the cabinets, at the folder containing Victoria's final gift waiting on the desk for another day. Let's go. The ceremony was held in the garden. 17 families formed the audience. Over 100 people who had been brought together by tragedy and transformed by justice. Marcus stood at the front wearing a simple gray suit, his eyes bright with tears he wasn't trying to hide. Jake walked Sarah down the aisle, 14 years old and already tall enough to match her height. His face was solemn with the weight of the moment, but she could see joy underneath the gravity. You ready for this? He whispered. I've been ready for a long time. I just didn't know it. Helen officiated with words that honored both the occasion and the history that had brought them to this moment. We gather today not just to celebrate a marriage, but to celebrate a community. A family that grew from tragedy into triumph. From 17 broken families into one united force for justice. She looked at Marcus and Sarah with eyes that had witnessed 60 years of fighting. Love is not just a feeling, it's a choice. A commitment to stand beside someone through difficulty and doubt, through fear and fury, through all the battles that life throws in our path. Marcus and Sarah have already proven they understand this truth. They've been standing beside each other for years, building something beautiful from the wreckage of something terrible. Marcus took Sarah's hands. I, Marcus Anthony Williams, take you, Sarah Catherine Mitchell, to be my wife, my partner, my fellow warrior in the ongoing fight for justice. I promise to love you through victory and defeat, through peace and conflict, through every chapter of the story we're still writing. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. I, Sarah Catherine Mitchell, take you, Marcus Anthony Williams, to be my husband, my companion, my home after all these years of wandering. I promise to love you completely, to trust you absolutely, and to build a life with you that honors everyone who sacrificed to give us this moment. Helen smiled through her own tears. By the power vested in me by the internet and the state of North Carolina, I pronounce you husband and wife. Marcus, you may kiss your bride. The kiss was tender and full of promise. Around them, 100 people who had been robbed and restored, broken and rebuilt, cheered for the couple who had led them through darkness into light. The reception lasted until midnight. Stories were shared, toasts were raised, children ran through the garden while elders watched with joy that had taken 70 years to arrive. Marcus pulled Sarah onto the makeshift dance floor as the band played something slow and sweet. Any regrets? Sarah looked around at her family. Emma teaching a group of children to sketch in the fading light. Jake deep in conversation with Marcus's grandson about advocacy strategies. Baby Rose asleep in Helen's arms, surrounded by people who would teach her what it meant to fight for justice. Not a single one. Even with Victoria's folder waiting on your desk, even knowing there's more fighting ahead. Especially because of that. Sarah rested her head against Marcus's chest. I spent so long thinking I had to choose between happiness and purpose, between living my life and fighting for justice. I thought they were opposites. And now I understand they're the same thing. The fighting is how I live. The justice is what gives my life meaning. And loving you, being loved by you, that's what makes all of it possible. Marcus held her closer. Rose would be proud. I know, I can feel it. They danced until the music stopped, until the guests went home, until only family remained in the garden, some where roses bloomed in patterns 100 years old. Sarah stood on the porch as the last car drove away, Marcus beside her, their children scattered through the house, preparing for sleep. Tomorrow we go on our honeymoon, Marcus said. 2 weeks in Costa Rica, no phones, no legal documents, no foundation business. And then we come back and finish what Victoria started. Sarah nodded slowly. 7 families, 23 properties. We'll handle it, together, the way we handle everything. She leaned against him, feeling the warmth of his body against hers. Helen was right, you know. About what? About Rose and Catherine, about how they spent their lives fighting and never made room for love, never allowed themselves to be happy while the battle was still being fought. You think they made a mistake? I think they were doing the best they could with what they had, but I don't want to repeat their story. I want to write my own. Sarah turned to face her husband. I want to fight for justice and be happy. I want to pursue the truth and raise my children in peace. I want to honor their legacy without being consumed by it. That's a lot of wanting. It is, but I've spent too long being afraid of wanting things, afraid that if I reached for happiness, the universe would punish me by taking it away. And now, Count, Sarah smiled, now I'm reaching anyway. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together, and we'll keep reaching, keep fighting, keep loving. Marcus kissed her forehead. That sounds like a good plan. It's the only plan I have. They stood together on the porch of Rose's house, looking out at the garden where 4 generations of Chen women had planted seeds of justice. Behind them, their children prepared for sleep, and ahead of them, new battles waited to be fought. But tonight, there was only peace, only love, only the knowledge that they had earned this moment through sacrifice and struggle and stubborn refusal to give up. Tomorrow, the fighting would resume. Tonight, they rested. 2 years after the wedding, Sarah stood before a congressional hearing in Washington, D.C. The room was packed. Cameras lined the walls. Senators sat in elevated positions, their faces grave with the weight of what they were about to hear. Behind Sarah, representatives from 40 families filled the gallery, their presence a testament to the scope of what had been uncovered. "Mrs. Williams," Senator Morrison began, "you're here today to testify about what you've called the largest coordinated property theft scheme in American history. Can you walk us through your findings?" Sarah opened the folder in front of her. Victoria's final gift expanded through 2 years of investigation into a case that had shocked the nation. Senator, between 1948 and 1975, 8 wealthy families in North Carolina systematically stole 40 properties from immigrant and minority families through a coordinated scheme involving predatory lending, bribery of public officials, and in several documented cases, murder. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The total current value of these stolen properties exceeds $54 million. The generational wealth denied to the victims' descendants is incalculable. Senator Morrison leaned forward. "You've alleged that several of these families continue to hold positions of significant power and influence. Can you name them?" Sarah looked at the camera, broadcasting her testimony to millions of Americans. "Yes, Senator, I can." She named them one by one. The Worthingtons, the Caldwells, the Marshalls, the Sterlings, the Beaumonts, the Prescotts, and the Harrisons, whose crimes had started everything. These families operated as a consortium. They shared information about vulnerable targets. They coordinated their predatory lending practices. They protected each other when investigations came too close. Sarah's voice was steady, and when people threatened to expose them, they eliminated those threats, permanently. "You're alleging murder. I'm documenting murder. My grandmother Rose Chen spent 60 years collecting evidence. My mother Catherine Mitchell spent 10 years building a legal case. Both of them died before they could testify. My first husband, David Mitchell, was killed when he attempted to expose the conspiracy from the inside. These weren't accidents. They were assassinations designed to protect generational wealth built on theft." The room fell silent. Senator Morrison spoke carefully. "Mrs. Williams, these are serious allegations against some of the most prominent families in North Carolina." "They're not allegations, Senator. They're facts. I have documentation for every claim I'm making. Bank records, property transfers, communication logs, testimony from Charles Harrison, who participated in the conspiracy for 40 years before his conscience finally caught up with him." She held up the folder. "Everything is here. Everything needed to pursue justice for 40 families who lost everything. I'm asking this committee to authorize a full federal investigation and to ensure that no amount of wealth or influence can prevent the truth from coming to light." The hearing lasted 6 hours. Sarah answered questions until her voice was hoarse. She presented evidence until the senator's eyes glazed with information overload. She told stories of the families who had been destroyed, making abstract theft concrete through the faces and names of real people. When it was over, Marcus was waiting in the hallway. "You were incredible." "I was terrified." "Those aren't mutually exclusive." He pulled her into his arms. "The whole country watched you take down an empire. How do you feel?" Sarah thought about the question, about the journey that had brought her here, about the pregnant widow who had fled Charlotte with $47 and 2 frightened children seeking refuge in a house she'd never seen. "I feel like Rose, like Catherine, like every Chen woman who came before me." She looked at her husband with eyes that had witnessed too much and somehow still held hope. "I feel like I finally understand what they were fighting for." "What's that?" "Not just justice for the past, hope for the future. The belief that truth matters even when powerful people spend their entire lives trying to bury it." Emma and Jake were waiting at the hotel. 16 and 14 now. No longer the frightened children who had hidden in a pantry while intruders searched their home. They'd grown into young adults who understood that privilege came with responsibility and that inheritance meant more than money. "Mom, you were amazing." Emma hugged her fiercely. "I recorded the whole thing. Every family needs to see this." "The internet is already exploding," Jake added, showing her his phone. #JusticeFor40 is trending worldwide. People are donating to the foundation faster than we can process the payments. "How much? 3 million in the past 6 hours. And climbing." Sarah sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." Marcus sat beside her. "You've been talking for 6 hours. Let the world talk for a while." Baby Rose, not such a baby anymore, at almost 3, climbed into Sarah's lap. "Mama on TV." "Yes, sweetheart, Mama was on TV. Mama famous." Sarah laughed, exhaustion and relief mixing in equal measure. Mama is tired, but yes, I suppose Mama is a little bit famous today. Helen called that evening. I watched every minute, her voice cracked with emotion. Rose would have given anything to see this day, to see her evidence finally presented to the people with power to act on it. It's not over yet. The investigation will take years. The families will fight back. Let them fight. You've won the battle that matters. You've made it impossible to ignore. You've put the truth into the public record where it can never be erased. Sarah thought about all the years of secrecy, the buried evidence, the murdered witnesses, the systematic erasure of crimes committed in plain sight. Helen, do you think they knew Rose and Catherine? Do you think they understood what they were building? I think they hoped. That's all any of us can do. Hope that the seeds we plant will eventually grow into something beautiful. Helen paused. You've made their hope real. That's the greatest gift you could have given them. The federal investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Within 6 months, grand juries had been convened. Within a year, indictments began flowing. The Worthingtons were the first to fall, their patriarch arrested on charges of conspiracy fraud and accessory to murder. Sarah watched the coverage from Rose's study surrounded by the journals that had made it all possible. They're trying to cut deals, Robert reported during a video call. The Caldwells want to testify against the others in exchange for reduced sentences. The marshals are claiming they didn't know about the murders. Will any of them walk free? Some might get reduced sentences, the ones who can prove they weren't directly involved in the killings. But the core conspirators, Robert's voice carried grim satisfaction. They're going away for a very long time. And the properties. The court has frozen all assets pending resolution. When convictions are secured, the properties will be transferred to the victim families or sold and the proceeds distributed. Sarah did the math in her head. $54 million, 40 families, generations of stolen wealth finally being returned. It's not enough, she said. It will never replace what they lost. No, but it's something. It's acknowledgement. It's justice imperfect as it is. Robert leaned closer to the camera. Sarah, you need to understand what you've accomplished. This is the largest wealth restoration in American history. Textbooks will be written about this case. Law schools will study it for generations. I don't want to be in textbooks. I want the families to be okay. They will be, because of you. The Magnolia Foundation had transformed beyond anything Sarah had imagined. What started as a mechanism for Rose's inheritance had become a national organization with offices in 6 states, hundreds of employees, thousands of volunteers. A mission that had expanded from the original 17 families to any community affected by historical property theft. Emma ran the Arts and Education Division. Her stolen gallery concept had been replicated in museums across the country, teaching children about historical injustice through faces and stories rather than abstract statistics. Jake headed the youth advocacy program, training teenagers to become community organizers and legal researchers. His analytical mind had found its perfect purpose, channeling the protective instincts that had once manifested as hypervigilance into systematic change. Baby Rose, now 4 years old, had become the unofficial mascot of the foundation. Her face appeared on brochures and websites, a symbol of the future they were fighting to build. And Sarah presided over it all, from Rose's study, the same room where her grandmother had spent 60 years documenting crimes she never lived to see punished. Marcus found her there one evening, staring at the wall where Rose's photograph hung beside Catherine's and now Sarah's own. 3 generations, he said softly. 3 women who refused to give up. 4 generations? Sarah touched her stomach. I'm pregnant. Marcus's face transformed through shock, joy, wonder, and something that looked like fear. What? Found out this morning. I wanted to tell you somewhere meaningful. Sarah. He pulled her into his arms. Another baby, at our age. 41 isn't that old. It's old enough to know better. But he was smiling. Are you happy? I'm terrified and exhausted and overwhelmed by everything we're still fighting for. She looked up at him. But yes, I'm happy. Happier than I ever thought I'd be. What do you want to name it? Sarah looked at the photographs on the wall. Rose, Catherine, the women who had made everything possible. If it's a girl, I want to name her Hope, because that's what they gave us. That's what we're trying to give the world. And if it's a boy, then we'll name him David, Sarah's voice caught, after his father, the man who died trying to do the right thing. Marcus held her tighter. He would have liked that. I think so too. The final trial concluded on a Thursday in March. Sarah sat in the gallery as the jury foreman read the verdicts. Guilty, 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 guilty. Over and over, the word fell like hammer blows, each conviction another crack in the foundation of generational injustice. The Worthington patriarch received 30 years, the Caldwell matriarch 25. The Marshall brothers' life sentences for their direct involvement in 3 murders. When the last verdict was read, Sarah walked out of the courthouse into spring sunshine and the flash of 100 cameras. Mrs. Williams, how do you feel about the verdicts? Mrs. Williams, what's next for the foundation? Mrs. Williams, do you have a message for the victim families? Sarah faced the cameras, feeling the weight of everything that had led to this moment. Today, justice was served. Not perfect justice. Nothing can undo 70 years of suffering. Nothing can bring back the people who were killed for knowing too much. But today, for the first time, the truth has been officially acknowledged. The crimes have been punished. The stolen wealth will be returned. She paused, thinking of Rose, of Catherine, of David. I want to say something to the families who are watching. You were not forgotten. Your grandparents were not failures. Your parents were not weak. You were victims of a conspiracy designed by powerful people who believed they could steal with impunity. They were wrong. It took 70 years, but they were wrong. A reporter pushed forward. Mrs. Williams, there are reports that other families in other states may have participated in similar schemes. Will you be expanding your investigation? Sarah looked at Marcus, who nodded almost imperceptibly. The Magnolia Foundation is committed to pursuing justice wherever it's needed. If there are other families who stole from vulnerable communities, we will find them. We will document their crimes, and we will hold them accountable. How long will you keep fighting? Sarah thought about the question, about the baby growing inside her, about the children she'd raised through chaos into purpose, about the husband who stood beside her through everything. As long as it takes. That's the lesson Rose taught me. That's the lesson Catherine died for. Justice doesn't have a deadline. Truth doesn't expire. And the people who think they can escape accountability by waiting out their victims are wrong. We don't forget. We don't give up. And eventually, we win. 6 months later, Hope Elizabeth Williams was born. Sarah held her newest daughter in the same room where she'd given birth to Rose 3 years earlier. The Magnolia Street house had become a symbol of continuity, a place where generations connected across time. Emma sat beside the bed, sketching her new sister with quick, confident strokes. She's beautiful, Mom. She looks like Rose. The original Rose, I mean. Look at those eyes. Jake stood by the window, uncharacteristically emotional. I never thought I'd have another sibling. When Dad died, I figured our family was as big as it would get. Families grow in unexpected ways, Sarah said. That's what I've learned. We think we know what our lives will look like, and then everything changes. Marcus appeared with coffee for everyone, his face soft with exhaustion and joy. Helen's on her way. She says she's bringing enough food to feed an army. That sounds like Helen. Rose toddled in, demanding to see the baby. Sarah helped her onto the bed, supporting her so she could look at her new sister's face. Baby, Rose announced solemnly. Yes, sweetheart, this is your baby sister. Her name is Hope. Hope, Rose repeated, testing the word. Hope pretty? She is pretty, and she's lucky, because she has you to help take care of her. The family gathered around the bed, 5 generations of fighting and loving and surviving, compressed into a single moment of peace. I was thinking, Emma said quietly, about what you said at the courthouse, about not giving up, about fighting as long as it takes. What about it? I want to study law. When I go to college, I want to learn how to fight the way you and Robert have been fighting. Emma's eyes were bright with determination. The art is important. The stories are important. But I want to do more. I want to be the one in the courtroom making sure people like the Harrisons can never hurt anyone again. Sarah felt tears threatening. You'd be an incredible lawyer. I learned from watching you. Watching how you never backed down, even when everything seemed impossible. Even when they threatened us and hurt us and tried to make us give up. Jake spoke up. I've been thinking about politics. Local government maybe, or city council. Places where decisions get made about communities, about who gets protected and who gets ignored. Jake, that's wonderful. You taught us that systems can be corrupt, but you also taught us that systems can be changed by people who care enough to try. Marcus put his arm around Sarah. Look what you've built, not just the foundation, not just the legal victories, a family of fighters, a legacy of purpose. Sarah looked at her children, at the baby in her arms, at the husband who had chosen her when choosing her meant choosing war. I didn't build this alone. None of us did. Rose started it. Catherine continued it. David tried to help in his own broken way. Helen kept the faith for 40 years. The 17 families trusted us when they had every reason not to. She looked up at the photograph of Rose on the wall, the same photograph that hung in the study. We're not individuals fighting alone. We're links in a chain that stretches back generations and will stretch forward into the future. Every person who refuses to accept injustice. Every voice that speaks truth to power. Every hand that reaches out to lift up someone who's been pushed down. We're all part of the same fight. Helen arrived an hour later with enough food to feed 3 families. She stood in the doorway, looking at Sarah holding Hope, surrounded by children and husband, and the accumulated evidence of a life well lived. Rose would have given anything to see this, Helen said, her voice breaking. She spent 60 years alone, fighting alone, believing alone. She never imagined there would be so many people carrying on her work. She's here, Sarah said. In everything we do, in every family we help, in every truth we uncover. She never stopped fighting, and because of that, neither have we. What happens now? Sarah looked at the question from every angle. The foundation was established. The major cases were resolved. The families had received their restoration. The criminals were in prison. For the first time in years, there was no immediate crisis demanding her attention. Now we build, she said finally. Not tear down, not fight, build. Schools in the communities that were robbed. Businesses owned by the families who were stolen from. A future that looks nothing like the past. Is that enough after everything? It's more than enough. It's everything. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead. Rose spent her life documenting destruction. I want to spend the rest of mine documenting creation, showing what happens when stolen wealth is returned, when communities are rebuilt, when justice actually changes things instead of just punishing wrongdoers. Marcus nodded slowly. A new phase. A new chapter. The Foundation's next priority isn't legal action, it's economic development, using the settlements and the donations to create opportunities for the families who were robbed, making sure their grandchildren and great-grandchildren have access to education and capital and everything that was denied to their ancestors. Jake's eyes lit up. Like a development bank, focused specifically on communities affected by historical theft. Exactly like that. Emma was already sketching ideas. We could document it all. The businesses that open, the students who graduate, the families that go from poverty to prosperity, a visual record of restoration. A stolen gallery in reverse, Marcus said. A restoration gallery. Emma smiled. I like that. The family spent the rest of the afternoon planning, brainstorming, dreaming out loud about what the future could look like. And for the first time in years, Sarah felt something she had almost forgotten existed. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, not the end of struggle, but a deep settled certainty that they were on the right path, that the fight was worth fighting, that the world could actually change for the better. 10 years later, Sarah stood in the dedication ceremony for the Rose Chen Community Center. The building occupied the exact spot where her great-great-grandfather's grocery store had stood before the Harrisons stole it. It housed job training programs, a community college satellite campus, a free legal clinic, and the permanent home of Emma's restoration gallery. 300 people filled the auditorium, representatives from all 40 families, foundation staff and volunteers, politicians and journalists and ordinary citizens who had followed the story for a decade. Emma, now 26, and a practicing civil rights attorney, introduced her mother. Most of you know Sarah Williams as the woman who took down the Harrison conspiracy, the woman who testified before Congress, the woman who built the Magnolia Foundation into a national force for justice. Emma paused, her voice catching with emotion. But I know her as Mom, the woman who held our family together through the worst years of our lives, who taught us that courage means doing right even when doing right cost everything, who showed us by example that inheritance isn't about money or property, but about the values we pass to the next generation. She turned to face Sarah. Mom, this building exists because you refused to give up. These families have their wealth back because you refused to give up. My sister Hope is growing up in a world where the truth has been told and the criminals have been punished because you refused to give up. Emma's voice strengthened. Rose Chen planted seeds of justice that took 70 years to bloom. Catherine Mitchell watered those seeds with her life. And you, Mom, you made sure the harvest came in. That's an inheritance worth more than any amount of money. That's a legacy that will last forever. Sarah took the podium with tears streaming down her face. She looked out at the audience. At Marcus, gray-haired, now but still standing beside her. At Jake, running his own advocacy nonprofit, making the political change he'd dreamed about as a teenager. At Emma, fierce and brilliant, and everything Sarah had hoped she would become. At 14-year-old Rose, already showing her mother's determination and her namesake's stubborn refusal to accept injustice. At 10-year-old Hope, too young to understand everything, but old enough to know she was part of something important. 70 years ago, my great-great-grandmother Rose Chen started keeping journals. She documented crimes she knew might never be punished. She preserved evidence she knew might never be seen. She believed against all evidence that someday truth would matter more than power. Sarah's voice carried across the auditorium. 30 years ago, my mother Catherine found those journals. She built a legal case. She prepared to expose everything. And she was murdered and mirrored for getting too close to the truth. 15 years ago, my husband David discovered he'd been sent to spy on me, and instead of completing his mission, he fell in love. He started gathering evidence against the people who had raised him, and he was murdered for choosing love over loyalty. 10 years ago, I was a pregnant widow with 2 children and $47 to my name. I fled to a house I'd never seen looking for safety. Instead, I found a war that had been waiting 70 years for someone to fight it. Sarah gripped the podium, feeling the weight of everything that had led to this moment. I didn't choose this fight. None of us did. We inherited it. From grandparents who were robbed. From parents who were murdered. From ancestors who suffered in silence because no one with power would listen. But here's what I've learned. The fight chose us for a reason. Every generation has its battles. Every era has its injustices. And every family has to decide whether to accept things as they are or work to make them better. She looked at her children. My children are fighters. Emma prosecutes civil rights cases. Jake builds political power in underserved communities. Rose is already organizing her classmates around issues she cares about. And Hope, my baby, Hope, she's growing up in a world where she knows the truth, where she understands that her family didn't just survive injustice, we transformed it. That's the real inheritance. Not money, not property, not even justice. The real inheritance is the knowledge that ordinary people can change the world. That truth eventually defeats lies. That love is stronger than hate. And that giving up is never, ever an option. Sarah stepped back from the podium. This building is named for Rose Chen, but it belongs to all of us, to everyone who refused to forget, to everyone who kept fighting when fighting seemed hopeless, to everyone who believed against all evidence that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. She raised her hand toward the crowd. We are the inheritance. Every one of us. And as long as we keep fighting, as long as we keep loving, as long as we keep believing in each other, the people who stole from us, who murdered our families, who thought they could bury the truth forever, they will never, ever win. The audience rose to their feet. 300 people applauding. 300 people who had been brought together by tragedy and transformed by justice. 300 people who understood that the fight wasn't over, would never be over, but that the fighting itself was what gave life meaning. Sarah found Marcus in the crowd. He was crying openly, making no effort to hide his emotion. I love you, he said when she reached him. I love you too. What happens now? Sarah looked around the room, at the families who had been restored, at the children who would grow up knowing their history, at the building that would serve the community for generations to come. Now we live, she said. We raise our children. We support our community. We keep building the world Rose imagined when she started writing in those journals 70 years ago. And if new injustices arise, if new powerful people try to steal from the vulnerable, Sarah smiled, and it was the smile of a woman who had survived everything the world could throw at her and emerged stronger on the other side. Then we fight. That's what Chen women do. That's what our family does. We fight, and we win, and we never ever give up. Marcus pulled her close. The inheritance continues. Always. For as long as there are children who need protecting, and truths that need telling, and powerful people who think they can escape accountability. Forever, then. Sarah looked at her family, at the community they had built, at the legacy they would leave behind. Forever. The Rose Chen Community Center opened its doors the next morning. Sarah watched from the sidewalk as families streamed in, children heading to the free tutoring program, adults signing up for job training, elderly community members gathering in the senior center that occupied the building's top floor. Helen Crawford, 93 now and using a walker, stood beside her. We did it, Helen said softly. Everything Rose dreamed of, everything she spent her life fighting for. You did it. You kept the faith for 40 years when no one else believed. I just held the torch. You're the one who lit the fire." Helen's eyes were bright with tears. "Rose always said the right person would come along eventually. She was right. You were always the right person." Sarah took Helen's hand, feeling the paper-thin skin, the bones beneath the life that had been devoted to keeping a dead woman's dream alive. "Not just me. Emma, Jake, Marcus, Rose and Hope, the 40 families, the foundation staff, everyone who heard the story and decided it mattered." Sarah squeezed gently. "We're all the right people. That's the point. There's no chosen one. There's just people who choose." "Choose what?" "To care, to fight, to believe that justice matters even when injustice seems to be winning." Sarah looked at the building, at the community gathering inside, at the future taking shape before her eyes. Rose understood that, Catherine understood it, and now I hope everyone who walks through those doors will understand it too. Helen nodded slowly. "The inheritance. The only inheritance that matters." That night, Sarah sat alone in Rose's study. The room had been preserved exactly as it was when she first opened the door 15 years ago. Journals on the shelves, filing cabinets in the corner. The desk where Rose had spent countless hours documenting crimes and dreaming of justice. Sarah opened the first journal, the one Rose had started in 1948. The words were faded now, but still legible. "Today I begin my record. I do not know if anyone will ever read these words. I do not know if truth will ever matter more than power. But I know that silence is complicity, and I refuse to be complicit. So I write, and I hope, and I believe." Sarah turned to the last page of the last journal, the entry dated 3 weeks before Rose's death. "I am dying. I know this. The doctors say months, but I feel it in my bones. Less time than that. Before I go, I want to leave one final message for whoever finds these journals, whoever inherits this fight. Do not despair. Do not give up. Do not let the size of the battle convince you that victory is impossible. I have spent 60 years documenting crimes I may never see punished, but I have also spent 60 years believing. And belief in the end is stronger than despair. Whoever you are, wherever you come from, whatever brought you to this moment, you are enough. You have everything you need to continue the fight. The evidence is here. The truth is here. All that remains is for someone to care enough to use it. I hope that someone is you, and I hope that when you finish what I started, you will find what I never found: peace. Not the peace of surrender, the peace of knowing that you did everything in your power to make the world more just. That is my gift to you. That is my inheritance. Not money, not property, just hope, and the stubborn, irrational belief that hope is enough." Sarah closed the journal. She looked at the photograph of Rose on the wall, at Catherine beside her, at herself added years ago, completing the trinity of women who had fought this war across generations. "We did it," Sarah whispered to the photographs. "Everything you hoped for, everything you died for, we did it." She felt something brush against her face, a breeze from nowhere, a touch that might have been imagination, or might have been something more. "Thank you," she said, "for believing, for hoping, for never giving up, even when giving up would have been so much easier." Sarah stood and walked to the window. Outside, the Magnolia Street neighborhood slept peacefully. Families safe in homes that could never be stolen from them. Children dreaming of futures that stretched bright and unlimited before them. A community that had been robbed and restored, broken and rebuilt, destroyed and resurrected. "The inheritance continues," Sarah said to the night. "Not just money, not just property, not just justice. Something bigger, something that would last long after the buildings crumbled and the legal records faded and the names were forgotten. The knowledge that ordinary people could change the world, that truth could defeat lies, that love could conquer hate, that the fight was always, always worth fighting." Sarah Mitchell Williams, daughter of Catherine, great-granddaughter of Rose, mother of Emma and Jake, and Rose and Hope, wife of Marcus, leader of the Magnolia Foundation, victor in a war that had lasted 70 years. She had inherited nothing but courage, and courage she had learned was everything. The end.